Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku had endless strength part 3. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 4, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content and leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story, 𝗵𝗃𝗧𝗵𝗲 from AO3. So let's start the video. As he and Kaken watched Todoroki be taken away on a stretcher, Izuku couldn't help feeling a little bad. He may have taken his role as a nihilistic, apathetic villain punishing others because he hated his own quirk a little too seriously. Still, Green-sensei asked him over his comms to make it hurt if Todoroki tried facing him on his own. "Oi, knock it off with that look, Deku," Kaken said, interrupting his thoughts. The Bastic made his own bed. "Come on, let's go meet up with the other extras." So, Big Green started when both boys entered the observation room. Normally, we'd use this time to name an MVP and talk about what each team could have done better. However, since Todoroki disqualified his team not 10 seconds after the exercise began and we've already gone over his mistakes, we're gonna skip that and move on to the next match in a new building. And with that, All Might drew another 2 balls. Team H, the heroes versus Team C, the villains. So, Shinso started as he and 𝗵𝗲𝗄 made their way the building. "Any ideas, boss?" "Boss?" 𝗵𝗲𝗄 questioned. "You know, since we're playing villains, I figured you could be the criminal mastermind while I'm your loyal minion," he said, rubbing the back of his head. He really hoped his costume's high collar as well as the voice changer and visor covered his face enough to hide his blush. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 couldn't help giggling at that. "Cammy, how could she be so beautiful and cute at the same time?" "Very well, my minion," she said in a regal tone. "The first thing we need to do is see if we can move the bomb to another floor. Once that's done, I was considering staying with the bomb and using steel beams to bar the door. Since Tsu can climb walls, we'll also need to watch and booby-trap the windows. I'd also like to place some cameras around the 3rd and 4th floor. Meanwhile, you patrol the halls and try to catch them off guard with your quirk." "Sounds good to me," he said as they entered the building. "Cool costume, by the way." "Thank you," Momo said, unable to help her own blush. "I like yours too. I'm just glad mine suits my quirk's unique needs." She still remembered how angry her parents were when the lead costume designer of the support branch of their company presented what would barely qualify as a swimsuit as her hero costume. It offered little to no protection, her stomach and cleavage on full display, and had a shelf protruding from her back to hold her 𝐎𝐻𝑒𝐼𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖 that could cripple her if she fell wrong, which was incredibly likely due to the height of the heels on the boots. Needless to say, they were demoted and replaced with someone who suggested a DNA-infused bodysuit under removable armor. She wore a lightly armored red flak jacket and form-fitting pants with large diamond-shaped holes on her outer thighs to access her quirk through the black, sleeveless bodysuit underneath. The jacket had 6 yellow pockets and a magnetic seam on both the front and back that opened up when she needed to make larger objects. Around her waist was a yellow belt with additional pouches, half of which were filled with snack bars, and her 𝐎𝐻𝑒𝑖𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖 comfortably tucked away in a large pouch on her hip. She also wore yellow knee and elbow pads and red gloves with black fingers and palms and red high-top boots with yellow soles and an additional pouch on each outer ankle. "Oh, it definitely suits you," Shinso couldn't help thinking. He then quickly shook that thought from his mind before the Angel of Death could overhear it, and he and 𝗵𝗲𝗄 got to work. "Heroes, you may now enter the building." All Might's voice boomed over the intercom. "Dark Shadow," Tokoyami said. "On it," the quirk said, shooting out from Tokoyami and quickly peeking through every window as they slunk up the building. It wasn't until the 5th floor that Dark Shadow found what they were looking for. Quickly scanning the room from the bottom corner of the window, they saw 𝗵𝗲𝗄 was alone with the bomb, wearing sunglasses for some reason and looking at a tablet while eating a snack bar and holding a staff. He also saw the door was barricaded and couldn't find Shinso. Ducking under the window before 𝗵𝗲𝗄 saw him, he signaled this info to Fumi and Tsu before trying to sneak in through the window for a quick win. However, just cracking it open a few centimeters was enough to pull the pin on a flashbang Matryoshka doll. Screaming in pain, Dark Shadow quickly retreated back inside Fumi. "Is he okay, Rabbit?" Tsu asked. "He will be fine," 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐴 nodded, sagely. Bright light, as is common for those who revel in darkness, weakens him. They just need a moment to recuperate, right? 𝗬 sighed as what looked like a steel curtain came down on the broken window. Well, I guess we'll have to find another way in. They knew they could go through the front, but both had agreed that was too obvious. She then jumped and started climbing up the building. Looking through a window on the 3rd floor and seeing no booby traps, she opened it and used her tongue to grab 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐴. Keeping their eyes and ears open for any signs of 𝗧𝗵𝗲, 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐴 stuck to the shadows to help give Dark Shadow the strength he'd need to break through the wall of the bomb room while 𝗬 crawled on the wall. However, neither of them realized they were already being followed. "Hey, 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄," 𝗬 asked. "Yes, 𝗧𝗏." Before 𝗬 could warn him, she didn't say anything. 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄 was already under 𝗧𝗵𝗲's control. Turning around, she saw the villain lazily standing a few meters behind them with his arms crossed. "Never mind, 𝗵𝗃𝗃," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said in a perfect imitation of 𝗬's voice before hitting a button and continuing with his own voice, though slightly pitched down. "Gonna have to thank Mike-sensei for suggesting my mask be able to throw my voice. Let Fumi go." Dark Shadow yelled, erupting from 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐴's back and charging at 𝗧𝗵𝗲. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 dodged the attack and managed to block a kick from 𝗬, though it managed to send him sliding back a few centimeters. No surprise this girl can kick, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 thought. "Surrender, villain," the frog girl said as Dark Shadow came swiping at him again. "Yeah, no, we're not doing that," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said as he kept dodging the quirk's attacks. He then smashed a small capsule on the floor that erupted into a flash of light, causing Dark Shadow enough pain that it knocked 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄 out of 𝗧𝗵𝗲's quirk. However, it was too late as 𝗧𝗵𝗲 used the moment of disorientation from both of his opponents to tie capture tape around 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄's arms. "𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄 has been captured," Big Green said over the speaker. "Damn," 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄 sighed in defeat. "Sorry, Fumi," a much smaller Dark Shadow pitifully apologized. "Do not apologize, my friend," 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄 said, nuzzling his quirk. "This failure was my own. Just you and me now, 𝗬," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said, pulling out his tonfas and giving them a spin. 𝗬 didn't respond. Instead, she kept her distance, sticking to the ceiling until her eyesight recovered. Once it did, she shot down, bouncing around the room and delivering a series of kicks he managed to just barely dodge while managing to get in a few hits on her with his tonfas. She then jumped back and clung to a wall while shooting her tongue out and using it to grab hold of one of the weapons. Digging his heels in as she attempted to yank the tonfa from him, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 smirked under his mouthpiece as he used his free hand to activate a preset voice. "Do you know what happens to a frog when it's struck by lightning?" he said in a woman's voice with a South African accent, pressing a button on the top of the handle of his other tonfa and making the top of the weapon spark with electricity. "The same thing that happens to everything else." 𝗬's already wide eyes widened further. Before she could let go of the tonfa, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 used the other one to send 25,000 volts through her tongue, stunning her and causing her to lose her grip on the wall and fall to the floor in a twitching heap. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 then quickly turned off the stun setting and stopped the elongated tongue from dragging on the floor as he approached the twitching and weakly rib-biting girl on the ground, securing her and the win for his team. "Both heroes are subdued," All Might announced. "Villains win." "Sorry, 𝗬," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said, drawing a knife and cutting her and 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄 free. 𝗵𝗃𝗃 tiredly stuttered with her tongue hanging limply from her mouth and draped over her shoulders like Izuku's scarf as Dark Shadow carried her. "I just hope by Tath's won't be affected." "Well, you'll have to ask Recovery Girl about that," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said, rubbing the back of his head. Soon, Yamamoto joined them and excitedly hugged 𝗧𝗵𝗲. "We won, 𝗧𝗵𝗲," she happily said. "I saw everything on the cameras. You were marvelous." "Thanks, Yamamoto," he nervously said. Yeah, he was really hoping his collar and voice changer hid his blush. "All right, who can tell me who the MVP was?" All Might asked. "My vote goes to 𝗧𝗵𝗲," Kaminari said with a raised hand. "Yeah, he was the one who subdued the villains," Kirishima said. "But Yamamoto did a great job protecting the bomb," Sato said. "And 𝗬 fought really well," Hagakure chimed in. "I believe it goes without saying I am unworthy of such a title," 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝗄 said with his head down. "Settle down, brats," Big Green said, silencing everyone. For this match, the title of MVP goes to 𝐎𝐻𝑢𝐫 𝗵𝗲 asked, clearly surprised. Your plan and defenses were solid and you showed a great amount of trust in your teammate while ready to back him up if needed, All Might said, giving a thumbs up. Congrats, Shinso said to the still stunned 𝗵𝗲. Now, since the bots are still busy disarming 𝐎𝐻𝑢𝐫's booby traps, Big Green said while an explosion went off in the background, we'll once again move to a new building. By the end of the trials, they had gone through 5 buildings. Oh, quit sulking, Iida, Ojiro said as he shed the blue compression sleeve from his tail. You lost, it happens. I know, Iida sighed as he collapsed his armor into the briefcase. You and Shoji beat Uraraka and I fair and square. I just can't believe we lost in such a humiliating way. Oh, it wasn't that bad, Midoriya said. Ojiro tripped you and you ended up slamming into a wall. Big deal. Aunt Emmy's told me tons of stories about speedsters getting tripped up in the field. Remember when your 𝗵𝗃𝗏 broke his nose chasing after that street performer with the mime quirk? Oh yeah, I remember that. Kirishima laughed. Man, I love that guy's vids. Just be glad you Bastiches all got the chance to do something, Bakugo said as he slammed his case shut, muttering, stupid icy hot, under his breath. Yeah, and we didn't short ourselves out like Kaminari, Zero joked. How was I supposed to know Kirishima would be immune to my quirk? Kaminari whined. When was the last time you saw electricity affect rock? Shinso asked, cocking an eyebrow. Alright, point taken. I'm just bummed I didn't get to use any of the suggestions we got this morning, Rikido said with Koda nodding in agreement. I'll definitely need to remember to pack some honey sticks for next time. We can test out the effects when we get back to the dorms, Izuku excitedly said. Guys, Shoji called, observing a poster. Is it just me or is the bottom of this poster oddly wrinkled? We'll have to thank Shoji for pointing it out and Midoriya for letting us know, Yaoyorozu said as she finished filling up the hole. Yeah, imagine if Kaminari or Zero found it first, the floating bra and panties shuddered. Oh, they wouldn't be seeing anything for a long time, Jiro said, twirling one of her jacks with a nasty smirk. Alright, back to boy talk, Mina happily said with a clap. So, we all agree Todoroki's handsome, but too cold, both figuratively and literally. What's everyone's opinion on Sato? He's hunky and scores points for being a good cook, but he's not my type, 𝐻𝐻𝑢𝐫 said. Oh, are you more interested in blonde martial artists? Mina teased. I saw you looking at Ojiro in that orange GI. How did you dashed? 𝐻𝐻𝑢𝐫 said, clearly flustered before cutting herself off. I mean, how about Midoriya? Midoriya's probably the hottest, ribbit, Tsu bluntly said. Titsui. Uraraka practically squealed. I mean she's not wrong, Jiro shrugged, clicking her jacks together. He gives off punk vibes but is also super nice and helpful. Yeah, and super smart, Mina said. Actually he, Shinso, and Bakugo are probably the top 3 class hotties. I mean, sure, Bakugo loses points for his inability to remember our names, but that hair dash. Yeah, and Shinso does have this mysterious charm Todoroki would have if he wasn't such a jerk, 𝐻𝐻𝑢𝐫 said. 𝗵𝗲 hoped nobody noticed her blush at Shinso being called a hottie. She was fairly certain she liked him, but wasn't sure what to do with these feelings. Maybe she can ask Walter for advice. Can we please talk about something else? Uraraka asked. What do you think will happen to Todoroki? Oh, he'll probably end up with a verbal warning, Jiro scoffed. After all, he's the number 2's son. It's not like he'll actually face any consequences. Todoroki was sitting on the edge of the infirmary bed, staring at the floor. Even though Recovery Girl was long done healing him, he was told he couldn't leave. When asked why, she simply said his teacher wanted to have a word with him, whatever that meant. Soon enough, the door opened and in came Green Sensei. So, Big Green said, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. Care to explain what you did wrong? I underestimated Midoriya, Shoto said in his usual tone but now glaring at the floor. That much is obvious, Big Green said. Let's go in order. First, you completely dismissed your teammate, someone who knew your opponent far better than you. Second, you lost the exercise within 10 seconds, a new record. Showdown looked up, eyes wide at this, but Big Green continued. The bomb had a thermo detonator that you triggered when you decided to freeze the building. Had you performed proper recon, you would have seen it clearly labeled. Third, despite being clearly outmatched, you didn't even try to ask your teammate for help. I didn't need any help, Showdown said, glaring up at his teacher. He already admitted to underestimating Midoriya and wouldn't repeat that mistake. Clearly, you do if you think letting yourself slowly freeze to death is a viable strategy, Big Green said, glaring back down at him and leaning forward. I saw the frost forming on your arm. Had you used your fire, you'd have at least dash? I will never use his fire in combat, Showdown snapped back. As the two continued to glare at each other, Piccolo looked away and sighed. All right, what's going on? He asked in a much calmer tone. It's clear you have something against the flaming bastard and I want to know what it is. Showdown looked away. Fine, Big Green sighed. Have it your way. Until you're ready to talk to me or Izuku, you're barred from participating in practical lessons and will watch your classmates from the sidelines until the sports festival. If you still refuse to use your fire by then, you'll be transferred to Gen Ed. You can't dash. Oh, I definitely can. Now, you have 3 options. You can talk to me, accept your punishment, or save us both the trouble and be transferred to Gen Ed immediately. I'll take the punishment, Showdown finally said through gritted teeth. Suit yourself, Big Green said, cape billowing as he turned away and walked out of the room. Go get changed and get out of here. I'll show him, Showdown thought as he walked to the locker room, fists clenched. I'll show them all. I don't need his fire and I don't need anyone's help. I'll win the sports festival and beat Midoriya with her ice. Cammy, look at all the vultures, Hitoshi said, he and several others looking out the window at the swarm of reporters outside the front gate demanding information about All Might. Well, All Might teaching here is big news, Yamamoto said. I'm just glad we live on campus, Izuku said. Yeah, I'd hate having to go through them, Uraraka said with a shudder. The press is a natural part of being a hero, Uraraka, Ida pointed out. It's just something we'll all need to learn to deal with. Well, it looks like Hobo-sensei's gonna deal with them himself, Bakugo smirked as they watched Izuku approach the gate. Everybody watched as their teacher made a shooing motion with his hand before turning and walking away. When one angry reporter tried to follow, the lights at the entrance turned red and a tall, thick metal barrier shot up behind the front gate and all around the perimeter. Whoa! Kaminari yelled as he and several others jumped back in surprise. And that, my fellow classmates, is why you always carry your student ID, Izuku sagely said while Bakugo was laughing hysterically. Well, since we can see Sensei is on his way, I suggest we all take our seats, Ida said before looking at Izuku. How was that? Good, Izuku nodded. Just work on your tone. Soon enough, Izuku entered. Seeing everyone was quietly sitting and facing forward, he nodded to himself. Good, you're already learning, Izuku said, standing in front of the class. Now, I looked at the footage and read Big Green's and All Might's notes and for the most part, I was pleased with your performances. He turned his half-lidded gaze at Ida, who stiffened. Relax, Ida. Even your brother isn't immune to getting tripped up in the field. You and Uraraka may have lost, but you showed good teamwork. However, if and when you do get tripped up again, try to turn so you hit the wall shoulder first to lessen the damage. Right? Thank you, sir, Ida said with a quick nod. Kaminari, Sho said, making said teen jump. You need to stop relying so heavily on all or nothing attacks. As you saw from Shinso's fight with Azui, smaller, more focused electrical attacks can be just as damaging to your opponents. We'll work on basic hand-to-hand this Saturday and discuss long-range support gear with Midoriya-san and Power Loader. Wife, Sensei, Kaminari said, face a little pink. Sho's gaze next landed on Todoroki, who was looking down at his desk. Todoroki, Big Greens informed me of your punishment. You know what to do to get it lifted? Todoroki's eyes narrowed up at him and then back down to his desk. All right, now on to something that'll affect your future, Izuku said in a serious voice. While most of the class looked worried, the tiresome trio looked nonplussed. You need to choose a class representative and vice rep, he finished, zipping up his sleeping bag and sliding under his desk. I don't care how you do it, but it better be done before the end of homeroom. Drama queen, the trio thought as everyone else sighed in relief before jumping up and saying they wanted the job. I feel like I'm missing something, Hitoshi said to Izuku, confused why almost everyone, even 𝗵𝘃𝗲, wanted the position. Being class rep is a good way to get noticed by agencies, Izuku said, his own hand raised. It shows them you have what it takes to be a leader. Meh, pass, Shinso said, closing his eyes and leaning back in his seat. Too much extra work for more attention, which I also don't want more of than I need. Please, everyone, we are getting nowhere like this, Ida loudly said, making everyone quiet down. The class representative is an important position and should go to not only whoever's willing to put in the extra work dash. At this, Kaminari, Hagekure and a few others sat back down, but whoever holds the most trust and confidence amongst their classmates. As such, I suggest a vote. But we haven't really known each other that long, 𝗵𝘃𝗲 commented. Do we really know who we can trust yet? Besides, won't pretty much everyone just vote for themselves? Kirishima asked. Can't believe I'm saying this, but I agree with engines, 𝗵𝘃𝗲 said. We may not have known each other very long, but I think we know each other well enough to decide who we want representing us. Just make it a rule we can't vote for ourselves. We should also make sure whoever we vote for wants the job, Shinso said. I, for the record, do not. Very well, Ida said, writing candidates on the board and underlining it before writing his own name underneath it. Who still wishes to run? Izuku, 𝗵𝘃𝗲, Yamamoto, Mina, Tsu, Aoyama, and Ojiro kept their hands raised and Ida wrote them down. Then, Yamamoto created several uniform slips of paper and passed them out. After all the votes were tallied up, Izuku's jaw dropped and Yamamoto's eyes widened. Midoriya, 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐵 𝐔𝐸𝐽, Tsu 2. 𝗵𝘃𝗲, Minon, 𝗵𝘃𝗲 0. All right, Aizawa said, popping up. Midoriya, your class rep and 𝐒𝐲𝐻𝑖rozu will be vice republic. Dang it, Mina said, pouting while 𝗵𝘃𝗲 clicked his tongue in annoyance and looked away. Wow, 2 more people voted for me than I thought they would, Ojiro nervously joked. I suppose it's for the best, 𝗵𝘃𝗲 said. Agreed, Aoyama dramatically sighed. All that added stress would have given me wrinkles. Not even a single vote, Ida thought, trembling in his seat with disappointment. Whoa, almost half the class voted for you? Shota Nirenjiki, the vice rep of 1B, asked with wide eyes. He had decided to join his class rep, Kendo, at lunch today to get to know their sister class's reps. That's really impressive, Midoriya, Kendo said before sighing. I feel like the only reason everyone voted for me was because I shut Monoma up when he started ranting about leading us to victory against the scum of 1A. Not gonna lie and say that wasn't a big reason why I voted for ya, big sis, Hime joked. I still can't believe it, Izuku said, a blank look on his face as he stared down at his white rice. I still can't believe you're so dense as to not expect it, Hime scoffed. Yeah, Deku, Uraraka said. Except for Todoroki, everyone likes you. You're smart, helpful, and kind to everyone. If anything, I'm surprised you didn't earn more. Indeed, Ida chimed in. You have all the qualities of a great leader. That's why I voted for you. Same here, Sato said. Indeed, Yamamoto nodded. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 croaked in confirmation. Izuku's eyes were wide as he shot questioning looks around the table, getting nods or sounds of confirmation from several of his classmates. You all voted for me? Well, I wasn't allowed to vote for myself, now, was I? 𝗵𝘃𝗲 snapped. I didn't vote for you, Shinso lazily said. Oh, who did you vote for, Shinso? Yamamoto curiously asked. Instead of answering, Shinso started eating a little quicker. This was noticed by Himiko, who whispered something to Tokage that made both girls giggle. I didn't vote for you either, Kirishima said, rubbing the back of his head. I went with Bakubro. Quit calling me that, shark mouth, Katsuki scowled. Quit calling me shark mouth, Kirishima grinned back. Turnabout is fair play, Bakubro. Tetsu snickered. Shut it, lashes. Hey, Ida, Tsu asked, finger on her lower lip. 𝗵𝘃𝗲, what did Aizawa-sensei mean this morning about your brother getting tripped up in the field? Yeah, is your brother a hero, too? Sato excitedly asked. That would explain how he's so rich, 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 said, chin resting on her thumb and forefinger. How did you know my family was wealthy? Iida asked, stunned. No offense to either you or 𝗬𝗵𝗲, but it's pretty obvious by how you talk and act that you two are cut from the same cloth, Shinso deadpanned, the mention too blushing. Yes, well, Iida said, clearing his throat and standing up. It is true. We Iidas come from a long line of heroes going back to the beginning of the hero system itself. Are any of you familiar with the turbo hero, Ingenium? While everyone else gave nods or sounds of confirmation, 𝗏𝗧𝗏 and 𝗵𝐼𝐾 both had sharp grins as they saw their class rep turning red. Oh, Kendo is very familiar with Ingenium, 𝗏𝗧𝗏 said in a teasing tone while 𝗵𝐾 giggled maniacally. Why the hell did I let the two of you suck me into your conversation about hero crushes? Kendo groaned, red face buried in her hands. He's my elder brother, Iida proudly said, fists on his hips. That is so cool. I knew your costume reminded me of someone. Ribbit. With 65 sidekicks and being the current head of our family's agency, he is truly a magnificent hero and leader, and someone I aspire to be just like. Iida finished before sitting back down and shooting a smile at Midoriya. Tensei has often told me the coolest people in the world are those who help others. By that definition, you are without a doubt one of the coolest people I have ever met, Midoriya. Izuku couldn't help blushing. Before they could continue their conversation, an alarm bell went off. Warning! Level 3 security breach. A female voice sounded over the intercom. All students, please evacuate the building in an orderly fashion. Wait, what's level 3 again? 𝗵𝐾 asked, their group sticking together as they left the cafeteria. It means someone's gotten through the UA barrier, Izuku said. But that should be impossible. Iida was cut off by the wave of students flooding the hall. Students from every year and every department were pushing and shoving, trying to get to the exit. And here I am, without any of Uncle Hisashi's blood to yell at these idiots to chill, 𝗵𝐾 tried to joke. Though they tried to stay together, the group found themselves being split up and swept away by the current. Trying follow 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 caused Izuku to be pushed against a window, where he saw the intruders. Oh, for fuck's sake, Izuku tiredly said upon seeing the reporters gathered at the front door. Sighing, he looked around and proceeded to squeeze his way through to get to 𝗬𝗵𝗲 and Iida. 𝗬𝗵𝗲, can you make me a megaphone? Without saying a word, Momo unbuttoned the bottom of her shirt while both boys looked away and tried to give her enough space to create the item in question. Izuku then took the red megaphone and began looking for the next person to help with his plan. 𝗏𝗧𝗏, Izuku called out. Present, 𝗏𝗧𝗏's head said, popping up over the crowd and floating towards them. Do you think you can pick up Iida and carry him over to the exit? I should be able to, she said, her arms now floating over to them. Why? Instead of answering, Izuku turned to Iida. Iida, remember what I told you about not being so bossy? Yes, Iida nodded. Well, now's the time to forget it, Izuku said, handing him the megaphone. It's just the press outside. I need you to get everyone's attention and tell, not suggest, tell them to calm the hell down. Iida gave a confident nod and allowed 𝗏𝗧𝗏 to lift him up and carry him to the exit where she helped him balance over the doorway. Attention, everyone, he yelled into the megaphone, getting everyone's attention. There is no need to panic. If you look out the window, you will see it is only the press. We are UA students, the best of the best. Act like it and please proceed in a calm and orderly manner. Thank you. As the crowd began looking out the windows, confirming what the loud student said and seeing police lights flashing, Iida found Midoriya in the crowd, getting a smile and thumbs up from the greenette which he returned. After all members of the press were escorted off campus and everyone was accounted for, lunch was extended until the final class, where Aizawa and Midoriya-sensei were waiting for them. First off, I'd like to commend Iida, Yaoyorozu, and Midoriya, Aizawa said. You did well in getting everyone under control. Thank you, sensei, all three mentioned teens said. Next, now that you've all had the chance to try on your costumes, it's time to meet those who'll help you maintain and improve them, Midoriya-sensei said with a bright smile. While 1B's participating in their own battle trials, you'll be spending your heroics class getting to know the support course. So, grab your costumes and follow me. When they were halfway to the studio, Midoriya's phone vibrated and he saw it was a group chat message from 𝗵𝗲. He smiled at the picture of her in her hero costume and the message, "And here I thought I couldn't get any cuter." Like Hitoshi's costume paid tribute to Eraserhead, 𝗵𝗲's was heavily inspired by Vlad King. Her tight, long-sleeved red v-neck shirt had the same Y-shaped black trim that lined Vlad's collar, though her neckline wasn't as deep as the Blood Heroes, as well as a single black stripe running down each arm. On each hand was a white, elbow-length clawed glove with wide, metal wrist guards like her mother's that held spring-loaded syringes with tubes attached to the bottom that shot out to collect blood from a distance. She also wore black leggings under a red skirt that resembled a school uniforms and white knee-high boots with a red stripe down the center. She was winking under the round, orange visor, and over her mouth was a black face mask with a fanged smile on it that resembled a cat's and tubes attached to each side that disappeared into her costume at the shoulder and ran down under the black stripe to her gauntlets. Around her waist was a white utility belt with a belt buckle that was a yellow smiley face with fangs, and 𝐶𝐶 could be seen strapped to her left hip, while on each thigh was a garter belt with extra syringes and knives. To complete the costume, she had 2 bandoliers over her chest with several small capsules on them. While most were empty, he saw several full of blood that had the initials of several members of staff as well as her classmates on them. Unsurprisingly, Monoma's initials were absent. 𝗬𝗲𝗄𝐻's problem children. 𝐒𝐵𝗃𝗄𝐿. Not bad, Fangs. 𝗓𝗵𝗲 really suits you. 𝗓𝗵𝗲, especially the cat grinning cat face with smiling eyes. Small might, looking sharp, cuz, smiling face with sunglasses thumbs up. After giving it some thought, Izuku sent an invite to Uraraka, Tsu, Sato, Yamamoto, and Iida using info from the 1A group chat he and Yamamoto set up for the rest of the class earlier. Midoriya, while I am honored to receive your invitation, I feel the need to point out it is inappropriate to have your phone out during school hours, Iida quietly, for him, said with a small chop. Rolling his eyes at the hypocrisy, given how Iida himself would have had to check his phone to know he received an invite, Izuku put away his phone just in time to see the large, metal doors of the development studio. "Here we are, kids," Hisashi proudly announced. "My old home away from home." "You were a support student, sensei?" Yamamoto asked. "Sure was," Hisashi said with a grin. "The support course isn't just about engineering or costume design. I was the only student from my year in the intelligence and analytics track, taught by Nizu himself." Where'd that come from? Everyone wondered as Midoriya-sensei took a sip of tea from an ornate teacup that disappeared as quickly as it appeared as he took out his phone. "Now, I just need to send a quick text to Power Loader to make sure it's safe to dash." Suddenly, a massive explosion blasted the doors open. "Never mind," Hisashi simply said with a small smile while everyone else was freaking out. "Geez dash. Holy dash. What dash?" As the smoke cleared, they heard someone giggling. They then saw a pink-haired girl wearing black coveralls with the top half tied around her waist, a dark gray tank top, gloves with her index fingers exposed, and red and copper steampunk-looking goggles over her eyes, stepping out of the studio with a huge grin on her soot-covered face. "Well, I'd say baby number 7 is a rousing success," she proudly said with her hands on her hips. "A success?" Power Loader angrily questioned as he waved the smoke away. "𝗧𝗵𝗲, you said you were making rocket boots?" "And I did," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 excitedly said, pulling up her goggles to reveal yellow irises with crosshairs in the center. "Well, technically they were more like missile boots, but hey, potato. This girl is crazy." Almost everyone's sweat dropped. While Power Loader groaned and shook his head in exasperation, Hisashi patted him on the shoulder, making the hero jump. "Geez, senpai. Give a guy a little warning, will ya?" Power Loader said, gripping his chest. "Sorry, Higuri," Hisashi chuckled, pointing a thumb at the pink-haired girl excitedly looking over the damage to the doors. "I was about to text you when your problem child graciously opened the doors for us." "Yeah, graciously, sure," Power Loader sighed before clearing his throat and turning to the students of Class 1A, "Welcome to the development studio. My name is Majima Higuri, the excavation hero, Power Loader, and I'm the head of the support course. Now, if you'll follow me dash." The crazy girl, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, suddenly gasped. New clients, she excitedly shouted as she finally seemed to notice the gathered students and ran over to enthusiastically shake everyone's hands. The names 𝗧𝗵𝗲, inventor extraordinaire and future CEO of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 suddenly stopped, sniffing the air. Is that burnt caramel? Katsuki slightly flinched at this and 𝗧𝗵𝗲's cross-haired eyes immediately zeroed in on him with a mad grin. "Ugh," she excitedly shouted as she got right in Katsuki's face. "You're the blasty boy who sweats nitroglycerin and ignites it in his palms. What marvelous babies we shall make." As the red-faced blonde, for the first time in his life, could do nothing but sputter, Power Loader grabbed May by the back of her tank top and pulled her away. "𝗧𝗵𝗲, what have I told you about personal space and hacking into the school's student files?" Power Loader reprimanded his now pouting student. "As I was saying," Power Loader said as he continued to restrain the pink-haired gremlin, "if you will all follow me, I'll introduce you to the rest of my class, who I promise are much more restrained." The large, metal-lined room had various tools, materials, and machinery strewn throughout, with a corner that had a small pile of 6 support items in it and a sign taped to the wall that read 𝗧𝗵𝗲's Daycare. Behind a thick glass window was what appeared to be a testing room for costumes and support gear due to the slightly scorched mannequin surrounded by buzzsaws, guns, and various other weapons pointed at it. The support corps students were also strewn throughout the lab, each working on their own projects. While some could be heard grumbling to themselves about 𝗧𝗵𝗲 setting off another explosion, others simply continued working like nothing had happened. However, everyone looked up when Power Loader cleared his throat. "Everyone, this is Class 1A, he announced. Like with 1B yesterday, you will each be getting at least 2 Hero Corps students to work with. You will help them fix and further develop their costumes and support dibs on Blasty," 𝗧𝗵𝗲 yelled, suddenly popping up and attaching herself to one of Katsuki's arms, making him jump. "Hey, get the frag off me," Katsuki yelled, trying to shake 𝗧𝗵𝗲 off, even trying to threaten her with explosions from his other hand. However, seeing his quirk only seemed to excite her even more. Meanwhile, Power Loader kept looking between his problem child and his own hand that currently had a firm grip on nothing. Shaking his head, he looked at his clipboard and continued. "Anyway, like with 1B yesterday, Midoriya-san has assigned you your hero students. Midoriya-kun and 𝗵𝘃𝗲, you will be working for Kami's sake, senpai." Hisashi gave a devilish grin at the hero's despair. "Izuku, you and Katsuki have been paired with 𝗧𝗵𝗲, Hisashi said. "Yes." May excitedly cheered as she pumped her fist while still holding onto 𝗵𝘃𝗲, who had stopped trying to shake her off as his eyes widened in horror. "Thank you, Freckles-sensei. Come of us. Let's make us some babies." "The fuck you just say?" Katsuki asked, too stunned to do anything as he was dragged to May's desk with Izuku following with an amused expression. "Figures they'd get paired up with an 𝐒𝐴𝐼𝐵, Hitoshi sighed. While most of their friends gave him questioning looks, Yamamoe blushed. "Freckles-sensei," Hisashi couldn't help thinking with a crooked smile and slightly pink-faced. Once everyone was paired up, Power Loader called 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐺 and Kirishima over, handing the redhead a box and pointing him towards a changing room. "Unfortunately, your suit won't be ready until next week, 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐺, the hero said. "We're dealing with pretty experimental materials, after all." "Dang it," 𝐒𝐲𝐻 said, clothes drooping in disappointment. Kirishima soon came out of the changing room wearing a red leather cuirass with black piping along its seams that looked like something a modern samurai would wear, with red pauldrons over his shoulders that resembled his old ones but smaller, as well as red gloves with his knuckles exposed. "What do you think?" Power Loader asked. "The faux leather-like material over the tri-weaved inner layer will protect you from most gunfire and high-impact quirks, while the material against your chest is just as strong but more malleable to accommodate your quirk. A similar material was used for your gloves with retractable fingers in case you need to claw your way up a building or something. It's so manly," Kirishima grinned. "Thanks, sensei." Upon activating his quirk, the outer layer did indeed keep its shape while the material against his chest and hands molded to his jagged skin. He then heard a low whistle. "Looking good, Kiri," Mina said with a smile and thumbs up as she and her support student were carrying boxes past the ever-reddening boy. While nobody could see it, 𝗂𝗪𝗄 had a devious smile on her face. After all, why should she be the only one immune to teasing? Meanwhile, Nizu, Aizawa, Joke, Recovery Girl and Hound Dog are looking over the crumbled remains of the UA barrier. Picking up a piece, Nizu watched as it disintegrated in his paw. It is obvious that this was not the work of the press alone, Nizu said, dusting off his paws. A villain has managed to get through our security. The question is, for what purpose? A show of power, perhaps? I'd like to request some extra security for tomorrow's field trip, Aizawa said, his wife giving him a questioning look. I don't want to cancel the trip, but Big Green has a mission tomorrow and All Might's still getting used to his schedule. I've got a gut feeling something's gonna happen and I don't want to be caught with my pants down and have to solely rely on 13 for backup if he ends up flaking out on us. Understandable and agreed, Nizu said. I will see if Big Green's role in the mission can be filled by someone else or, at the very least, he can be returned before the end of the lesson. In any case, Inui, I would like you and Yamada to accompany Aizawa tomorrow. Done, the hound hero nodded. Aizawa sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose while Emi squeezed his other hand. He really hoped this gut feeling was just an ulcer finally developing after all his years of dealing with his problem children. You seem excited, Uraraka, Ribbit, Sue said as she and the rest of the class made their way to the bus. The girl in the pink and black suit next to her had been practically vibrating since Aizawa-sensei announced today's training would be for rescue work. Of course I am, Ochako happily said, pumping a fist. This is the kind of training I've been waiting for. I've wanted to be a rescue hero since I was 5 and saw that video of 13 using her quirk to suck up an entire building. Oh, I love that one, Izuku excitedly said, falling back and letting Momo lead the class. She was still an intern helping clean up the wreckage from a villain attack when she jumped in front of a family as the building came crashing down. She said it was the first time she used her quirk on something so large and had to use her whole hand. It was so cool. I know, right? Uraraka excitedly nodded. I'm surrounded by hero nerds, Shinso thought, a small smile hidden behind his collar as he watched Izuku and Uraraka start geeking out about 13. When they got to the front gate, Ida had suggested a line-up system to Midoriya that was quickly shot down. Ida, you do realize this is the same type of bus that drove us to our exam sites, right? Izuku asked. Upon remembering the more open layout of the bus he took, Ida blushed and backed away. All right, Ramblers, Izuku called, getting everyone's attention and pointing a thumb at the bus. The sooner we line up, the sooner we can get ramblin'. And that pocket? Kaminari asked, pointing at the next pouch on Izuku's belt. Pepper spray, Izuku tiredly answered. And that pocket? Stun gun. And that pocket? Lockpick set. And that pocket? Knockout gas. And that pocket? Lollipops. For distracting children at emergency scenes? Man, Deku, you're really prepared, Akin said, genuinely impressed. Yeah, were you a Boy Scout or something? Hagekure, wearing her P uniform, joked. I'd just rather be over-prepared than under, Izuku shrugged. After all, my strength fluctuates based on my sleep schedule. Besides, the first thing I learned from Uncle Sho was no good hero is a one-trick pony. Agreed, Yamamoto nodded from her seat next to Shinso, who was resting his eyes. Like that old, pre-quirk idiom goes, a jack of all trades is a master of none, but is oftentimes better than a master of one. That's why Walter made sure my training included so many different forms of martial arts and combat styles. I guess that makes sense, Kirishima said, looking at his hardened arm. Still, I wish my quirk was an augmentation or emitter type. My hardening is strong, but I can't really obey. Oi, what did I tell you about putting yourself down? Katsuki said, fist still buried in the spiky red hair. Ugh, thank you, Mina said, throwing her arms up in exasperation. I've been trying to tell him how cool his quirk is, but he just won't listen. I'm just saying, it'd be easier to stand out if my quirk was a little flashier or allowed me to do more, like Bakubros or Midoribros, Kirishima said, rubbing the top of his head. Kirishima, if you know a way, I'd love to trade quirks with you, Izuku joked, missing the slight flinch from one of his other classmates. Hardening is a great quirk. It's perfect for both offense and defense, it gives you a distinct look, you can turn it on and off, and it gets stronger the more damage it takes. Mine's nowhere near as 𝐸. Izuku was interrupted by a loud explosion going off in his face. It didn't hurt, of course, but it was loud and made him and a few others jump. 𝗔𝗂 was glad 𝗵𝗃𝗲, her support student, made her a sound-canceling collar that she currently had her jacks plugged into. "You shut up too, Deku," Katsuki said, getting back to adjusting his new gauntlets. He hadn't even gotten a chance to use his first ones and he already got an upgrade in the form of a Gatling feature. Inkling may be crazy, but he couldn't deny that she worked fast. "No using your quirk on the bus, 𝗵𝘃𝗲," Aizawa tiredly said, curled up in his sleeping bag in his seat behind the robot driving the bus. "I think we've all had moments where we wished we had different quirks, ribbit," Sue said, thinking about how she and her siblings had to be careful in cold weather. "Definitely," Kaminari said, looking down at his sparking hand before turning to Hitoshi. "Hey, Shinso?" "Yeah," he answered, opening one eye. "What's in that pocket?" he innocently asked, pointing at one of the pouches on his belt. "Caltrops," he answered with a sigh. "And that pocket? Smoke bombs? And that pocket? Flashbangs? And that pocket? Meow mix? W-. It's personal." While his students continued talking, Sho checked his phone. "UA teachers. Catnap, about 10 minutes from us. Catnap, everyone ready? 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐽𝐾, all set. DJ Crocodile, yeah. Starstruck, 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 starstruck. Barkmeat, just waiting on Yagi. Rabbit ears. Kale Queen, Yagi, face with raised eyebrow. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, I'm afraid All Might will be a little late. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, we need to have a discussion about his priorities as a teacher's slightly smiling face. 𝗒𝗪𝐽𝐾, oh, come on. DJ Crocodile, seriously dude? Barkmeat, damn it Yagi. Called it. Rabbit ears, sorry. Disappointed face, pleading face, pleading face. Rabbit ears, this morning was just one incident after another. Dizzy face with open mouth dashing away. Rabbit ears, I have around 10 minutes left, downcast face with sweat. Rabbit ears, I tried to convince Nizu to let me go as Mr. Yagi, but he was quite insistent we have this talk, grinning face with sweat. 𝗒𝗪𝐽𝐾, damn it. Face with steam from nose, pouting face with steam from nose, pouting face with steam from nose. DJ Crocodile, hey, you still got me and HD to help. Barkmeat, yeah, we can handle the pups. Barkmeat, we'll be fine, beaming face with smiling eyes, thumbs up. Sighing in exasperation, Shoyuta put away his phone and closed his eyes again, doing his best to ignore the sour feeling in his gut. Oh my gosh, it's 13. Uraraka squealed upon seeing her all-time favorite hero standing outside the large dome-shaped structure next to Hound Dog and Present Mike. Is that what I look like whenever I meet a new hero? Izuku quietly asked Katsuki and Hitoshi as the trio saw Aakan excitedly bouncing on the balls of her feet with a huge grin. She's nowhere near your level of geeking out, Katsuki scoffed, with Hitoshi nodding in agreement. While Izuku's face went a little pink, he couldn't help smiling at Aakan's excitement. It was so weird. Despite not sleeping for nearly 2 weeks, seeing her so happy somehow made him feel so warm. Maybe he should talk to his dad or recovery girl about this. Hello, everyone. 13 proudly announced as the large doors behind her and her co-workers opened up. And welcome to my unforeseen simulation joint, or USJ, for short. Sounds of awe came from the students as they saw the inside of the USJ. Whoa, look at the size of this place. It's huge. It's like an amusement park. Is that a water slide? This really is the USJ. There are 6 zones designed to simulate different kinds of disasters, 13 explained. The flood zone, the ruins zone, the landslide zone, the mountain zone, the conflagration zone, and the downpour zone. Now, before we begin, let me say one thing. Well, maybe 2 or 3, possibly 4 dash. I think they get it. Present Mike chuckled, lightly nudging the rescue hero with his elbow. Right, she said, clearing her throat before speaking in a much more somber tone. As many of you know, my quirk, Black Hole, is quite powerful and can be used to suck up anything and turn it into dust. I've used it to clear heavy debris and help save countless trapped civilians. At this, Uraraka was excitedly nodding. Despite their quirks being vastly different, She planned to use her quirk in a similar way. However, it can very easily be used to kill. This brought Uraraka's excited nodding to an abrupt halt and got everyone's attention. Like many of your own quirks, absolute focus on my part can mean the difference between life and death. Always keep in mind that no matter what task you're using your powers for, control is a necessity. Izuku looked down at his hand, remembering how he crushed a doorknob when he was 4 like it was tinfoil and how much he had to hold back to stop himself from permanently crippling or even killing Todoroki. Mina was thinking about how she accidentally splashed some of her acid on Aoyama's cape, burning a few holes in it. Though the Frenchman was upset, she was just glad it hadn't been his skin. Her acid may have been diluted, but it could have still badly injured her teammate. Ida remembered his brother telling him about an incident involving an American speedster who was running so fast that he ran right through a civilian, turning her into bloody paste. It made him ill, but his brother wanted him to know just how dangerous their quirks can be to others if they weren't careful. Todoroki glared at his left hand. Knowing how dangerous that bastard's fire was made his decision to reject it that much easier. His ice was much more practical and versatile for incapacitating multiple villains while being less harmful to civilians. If a bystander got caught in one of his attacks, he didn't need them blaming him for being burned. It would be their fault for not being fast enough to get out of his way. Thanks to Aizawa's QAT, you all have a solid idea of your quirk's potential, 13 continued. Because of All Might's combat training, you've experienced how dangerous your powers can be when used against other people. In this class, you will take what you've learned and use your quirks to help as opposed to using them to attack enemies or each other. After all, ensuring the safety of others is what being a hero is all about. That's all I have to say. Thank you. 13's so cool, Izuku and Uraraka both thought, clapping and cheering with everyone else. All right, Aizawa said, settling everyone down. First, we're going to dash. Show was interrupted by the lights flickering and the sound of the fountain sputtering. He heard Inui growl as he and his fellow teachers turned to the main plaza to see a vortex of dark purple mist appear in front of the fountain. As a man with hands covering his face, arms, and torso stepped through the mist, soon followed by several more threatening individuals as the vortex grew to the size of a wall, Sho donned his goggles and internally lamented how he should have listened to his gut. Hey, what's going on? Kirishima asked as he and several of his classmates tried to get a better look at what was happening in the main plaza. Has the training started already? Stay back. Hound Dog barked, making the students stop in their tracks. This isn't part of the exercise, lil listeners, Present Mike said, his usual playful tone replaced with a much more serious one. Those are real villains, Aizawa said, hand on his scarf as Hound Dog and Mike flanked him with 13 covering the rear, all ready to protect their students. Pissed, Ida, Midoriya whispered, hand on the other boy's shoulder as he backed them both away towards the back of the group while Kaminari explained he wasn't able to contact anyone. Midoriya, Ida's question was interrupted when his class rep put a hand over his mouth and jerked his own head towards the giant doors that were closing. Understanding what Midoriya was asking of him, Ida's eyes widened at the thought of abandoning his friends. However, before he could protest, Midoriya gave him a much more pointed look that said this plan was not up for discussion. At this, Ida reluctantly nodded and, without using his quirk, ran. He just barely made it through the doors before they slammed shut. Forgive me, my friends, Ida said, wiping his eyes before donning his helmet. I swear, I will return with help. He then activated his quirk and began running as fast as he could, quirk laws be damned. As the last villain exited the mist, a rather monstrous-looking creature with a beak full of sharp teeth and its brain exposed, the mist formed into a being with narrow, glowing yellow eyes. Interesting, the mist villain said. I see Eraserhead and 13, but no All Might. Also, the schedule we retrieved made no mention of Present Mike and Hound Dog making an appearance. So that's it, Hound Dog growled. Bastards used the PRS as a distraction to sneak onto campus. Damn it, the villain with hands all over him groaned in mock disappointment. And our new friends were so excited to meet the symbol of peace. Think maybe killing a few brats will get his attention? Hearing that, the teachers readied themselves. Aizawa's scarf began floating like it had a mind of its own. Mike opened his mouth and used a special throat spray. Hound Dog undid his muzzle, throwing it to the side to reveal his sharp teeth as he continued to growl and began foaming at the corner of his mouth. Knowing she had the least combat experience, 13 had her arms out, shielding the students. Mike, you and 13 protect the students and try to get them out, Aizawa said, he and Inui stepping to the edge of the steps. Me and Hound Dog will cover you until reinforcements arrive. Uncle Sho, let us help, Izuku said, stepping up with a determined look in his tired eyes as he was joined by the other 2 members of the tiresome trio, as well as Uraraka, Kirishima, Sato, and Yaoyorozu. You and Inui-sensei are both close-quarters fighters and your quirk is best suited to stealth and surprise attacks. We can dash. No, Aizawa said, steel in his voice. You will all stay here and follow 13 and present mix instructions. Anyone who attempts to follow us will be immediately expelled and blacklisted from every hero program in the country. Understood? Izuku's group, even Bakugo, flinched at this and backed away. Izuku himself clenched his gloved fists and glared at the floor. He's been awake for nearly 2 weeks. He was so strong and near invulnerable. He could help, damn it. Izuku, Aizawa said in a much more gentle tone, making Izuku look up and at his uncle, who still had his back to him. We'll be fine. What's the first thing you learned, even before I started teaching you? No good hero is a one-trick pony, Izuku admitted, blinking away the angry tears before nodding and backing off. Damn straight, Aizawa said, a smirk in his voice before turning to Zashi. Mike, scatter. Kids, cover your ears. As Mike took his place at the steps, Aizawa and Hound Dog readied themselves to, quite literally, jump into the fray. You ready, dog breath? Aizawa asked, getting a barking laugh from Inui. Always ready, kitty boy, Inui grinned, covering his own ears. Present Mike inhaled deeply before releasing his quirk with a 𝐒𝐻, blowing away several of the villains below and forcing others to their knees or even into unconsciousness due to the pain of the volume. Before they could recover, Hound Dog and Aizawa leapt down to take advantage of their enemy's disoriented state. Hound Dog tackled and suplexed a large heteromorph with 4 arms while Aizawa activated his quirk and used his scarf to grab and throw a downed villain into another 2 while breaking another's nose with a punch. Fucking rage gamer, the handy villain complained, rubbing his ears as he stepped out from behind the monstrous villain. 𝗓𝗏, kick him from the server. As you command, Shigaraki Tamura, the mist villain, 𝗓𝗏, said, waiting for Aizawa to look away from him before portaling himself away and leaving Shigaraki with the large villain. Meanwhile, Shigaraki began scratching his neck as he continued to watch Eraserhead and that mutt tear through the NPCs. You know what the worst thing about dealing with pros is, Nomu? Shigaraki asked, not expecting a response from the creature. It's when they live up to their hype. Deku, come on, Aachen said, breaking Izuku's concentration on the fight below. We need to go. Giving present Mike, who was using his quirk in quick, concentrated spurts, a final look, Izuku nodded and pulled an angry Kaken away as well. Unfortunately, it was after he looked away that a misty portal opened up underneath Mike. By the way, Midoriya, Kirishima asked, remembering seeing a woman with hair that spun like drills suddenly stop using her quirk before Aizawa kicked her in the face. What's Aizawa-sensei's quirk? Erasure, Izuku stated. He can cancel the quirk of anyone he looks at until he blinks. It doesn't work on heteromorphs. Whoa, that quirk's amazing, almost everyone thought. Wait, where's Ida? Yamamoto worriedly asked. Don't worry, Izuku said, shooting her and his other classmates a smile. I sent him to get help. Just as they were about 20 meters away from the doors, the villain made of purple mist appeared before them. Apologies, he said. But I cannot allow you to leave. My name is 𝗓𝗏 and we are the League of Villains. Though we have come to kill All Might, I cannot help but notice he isn't here. Was there a change in the schedule? 13 looked behind herself to call to Mike for backup, but was shocked to see the hero missing. Damn it, what happened to Mike? Guess I'll have to take care of this villain myself, she thought, the cap on one of her fingers popping off. However, before she could activate her quirk, a wave of ice shot past her, knocking her off balance. When she righted herself, with some help from Midoriya and Yaoyorozu, she saw the villain, as well as the front entrance, encased in a giant glacier. "That takes care of him," Todoroki flatly said as he stepped to the front of the group, shooting a cold look towards Midoriya as he did so. "You idiot!" Kaken yelled. "How the frag are we supposed to get out now?" Todoroki looked like he was about to reply when another purple vortex opened up in front of them and the villain was once again towering over him. "I suppose I should thank you, son of Endeavor," Kurogyari said, making said boy scowl. "You have made it that much more difficult for you and your classmates to escape." "Todoroki, move!" 13 yelled, pointing her finger. "Scatter and die!" the villain yelled as tendrils of purple mist surrounded the children. Izuku managed to push Uraraka away and saw Shoji grab her and Mina and, along with Rikido, Kaminari, and Siro, escape from the mist before he and the rest of his class were consumed by it. Suddenly, he found himself falling through the floor and into what he assumed was the flood zone. After managing to turn the fall into a sloppy dive, Izuku was swimming back up to the surface when he saw a villain with a shark mutation swimming towards him, mouth open and full of razor-sharp teeth. "Welp, time to test that myth about punching a shark in the nose," Izuku thought, drawing back his fist. However, Tsu came down on the villain like a green torpedo, kicking and knocking him off course. "Hey, Midoriya," she said before grabbing him with her tongue and swimming the two of them to the surface and dropping him onto a boat. "Thanks, Azui," Izuku said, wiping off his goggles and thanking whoever created the water-resistant clothing he wore. "I told you to call me Tsu," Tsu said as she climbed up onto the boat. "Right? Sorry," Izuku said, peering over the side of the boat to see a bunch of villains he assumed all had water quirks gathering around it. "Damn it," he thought, chin resting on his thumb and forefinger. "It's obvious they've been planning this for a while, especially if they're so sure they can kill All Might. They must have studied the layout and divided the villains up by the zones that'd complement their quirks. So why aren't they attacking?" His eyes then slightly widened as he came to a realization. "They don't know our quirks. If they did, they'd have sent Tsu to the conflagration zone or the landslide zone." "Ribbit, that's true." Tsu nodded as Izuku realized he just muttered that. "Tsu, do you think you could jump far enough to make it to shore?" he asked, checking for something on his utility belt. "Probably on my own, but I don't know about your added weight, Ribbit." "Don't worry about me," Izuku said, smiling as he held up a series of small grenades. 1 blue, 1 gray, 1 red, and 1 green. "I can get there on my own." "Damn it, I'm getting bored," one of the villains growled as he created a giant arm made of water. He had planned to destroy the ship and get those brats in the water where he and the other villains would have the advantage. However, just before it hit the boat, he saw something hit the arm. It quickly turned to ice all the way down to the villain's actual arm before shattering and raining chunks of ice down on himself and his comrades. "Whoa! Look out! The fuck dash? Was that an ice quirk?" On the other side of the boat, a series of explosions went off, forcing the villains on that side to swim around and gather with the others. "One of those kids has fucking grenades," one villain yelled as he joined the others. Suddenly, 3 gray grenades were thrown into the water and smoke began encompassing the surface. "Smoke bombs?" another villain coughed. A few thought they were being clever by going underwater until the smoke dissipated. However, this is what Midoriya was hoping for. He threw the last 2 experimental grenades May gave to him and upon hitting the water, they activated. The water around them began thickening and turning green, forcing the villains to struggle back up through the gooey substance. "Gah! The fuck is this shit? What happened to the water? I can barely move. Hey, keep that shit away from me." Seeing the villains were all distracted, both Midoriya and Tsu took this moment to jump. "That was amazing, Midoriya," Tsu said as they flew over the villains as the thick, slimy green liquid continued to spread the more they struggled. "Thanks, Tsu," Izuku smiled. "So, what's our next move, Ribbit?" Tsu asked as they splashed down near the shoreline. Before Izuku could respond, they both heard a loud shout of pain. Sharing a look, they both quickly and quietly made their way towards it. Back at the main entrance, after the mist dissipated, 13 was in front of the remaining children and staring down Kurogyari. This is bad, she thought. I have to be careful with using my quirk on this guy. If he opens a portal, he might be able to redirect the attack to one of the students or my coworkers. Behind her, Shoji was using his quirk to keep track of his classmates while the others were joining 13 in staring down their enemy. Mina had noticed the warp villain, 𝗬𝗎𝗫, had a neck brace he kept hidden under his mist and was trying to come up with a plan when she remembered something Midoriya wrote. "Hey, Kaminari," Mina whispered. "Did Midori's notes for you mention any team-up ideas?" After thinking for a moment, Kaminari's eyes widened in realization. "Oh, you mean Dash?" The bolt head was quickly shushed by Mina, who nodded. She then got Siro, Uraraka, and Sato to huddle up and they came up with a plan. 13, let me go, Sato said, stepping up. "I'm sure I can break through that ice and get help." 13 was about to protest, especially since she heard Midoriya say he already sent Ida when she saw Sato wink. What did that mean? Did her student have another plan? "Okay," she finally said, deciding to trust her students and uncapping her finger. "I'll hold him back as long as I can." "How foolish," 𝗬𝗎𝗫 said, the mist around him expanding. "Do you really think it's smart to reveal your plan in front of an enemy?" 13 then activated her quirk, sucking up the mist as Sato sucked down a stick of honey and bulked up. As it turned out, while natural sugar didn't make him quite as strong as refined, it came with the added benefits of making him faster and more coherent. As 𝗬𝗎𝗫 was about to open a portal behind 13 to redirect her quirk, he felt a pull on his neck brace. He saw there were several strands of something like tape coming from one student's elbows and had some strange liquid on them. "Kaminari," the pink girl shouted. Before 𝗬𝗎𝗫 could do anything, the blonde grabbed the strands of tape and sent 1.3 million volts up through the acid base Mina made. The villain screamed in pain and started violently spasming and convulsing as he fell to the ground. Not long after, the pain stopped and the girl in the pink space suit ran up and touched his brace. He then felt himself begin to float when the boy who said he'd try to escape delivered an uppercut that sent him flying up and into the ceiling. He thought he heard one of the girls say "release" and then found himself falling. Before he hit the ground, he was grabbed and brought into a chokehold by the muscular student. "Well done, kids," 13 said with her hand on a short-circuited Kaminari's shoulder to stop him from wandering. I don't understand," he barely managed to choke out. "Why didn't 𝗧𝗪𝗏 escape?" "Why would I?" the student asked. "After all, our fastest classmate left shortly after you arrived." 𝗬𝗎𝗫's glowing eyes widened. "Hey, guys," Shoji called with one of his extra mouths. "We need some help here." The students and 13 saw Shoji helping Tsu with a bloody Aizawa and unconscious hound dog. When they found the source of the yell, Tsu's already large eyes widened further while Izuku's narrowed in anger and fear. Near the shoreline and amongst several unconscious and injured villains was Hound Dog, who was also unconscious and bleeding from his mouth, clearly missing a few teeth. In the center of the plaza, they saw Aizawa, bloody and face down yet still struggling with both arms clearly broken by the monstrous villain that was sitting on his back while the one covered with hands was mocking him. "May as well be a quirkless child," the villain practically laughed. After Aizawa attempted to use his quirk on the monstrosity, it grabbed his head and clearly about to smash his face into the ground. That was when Midoriya acted. He leapt forward, drawing his fist back and, using his full power, landed a blow on the monster's face that caused a massive shock wave that blew across the plaza. Unfortunately, to Izuku's shock, the creature seemed unaffected. "Well, now," the handy villain started, tilting his head. "Who do we have here?" "On second thought, I don't care. Nomu kill the brat?" The monster, Nomu, then lazily backhanded Izuku. Shigaraki couldn't help laughing at the hero brat's body skipping and bouncing across the plaza and face first into a wall. "Well, that was fun. Now, Nomu, continue dash." Shigaraki was cut off by something hitting him in the stomach, sending him flying back and into the gentle embrace of Nomu. Father." He coughed, wriggling out of the creature's grasp and crawling to the hand that had flown off his face. After placing the hand back on, Shigaraki glared up at the soon-to-be corpse and was surprised to see the brat Nomu had sent into the wall scowling down at him, only his clothing appearing to have been damaged. "So, you're a tank, huh?" Shigaraki said, grasping his stomach as he stood. Well, let's see how much extra HP you have. No. The creature let out an inhuman roar before rushing Izuku. This time, Izuku was ready. Dodging the creature's attacks, Izuku tried to find a weak spot by delivering several quick, powerful jabs across the creature. However, nothing was working. You won't get anywhere like that, Shigaraki mocked. Nomu is the anti-symbol of peace, designed to kill All Might himself with a shock absorption quirk, to boot. Good to know, Izuku grunted as he tried a different tactic by managing to gouge out one of the monster's eyes. Unfortunately, it seemed to grow back. Wait, so not only is it as strong and fast as All Might, but it has a shock absorption quirk and a healing quirk? Izuku thought as Nomu managed to tear its claws across his shirt. How is this thing even possible? While this was happening, Tsu silently made her way over to Aizawa, who was trying to stand. Sensei, Tsu whispered. Ajui, Aizawa muttered through clenched teeth. Get out of here. I need to dash. Rip it, I need to get you to safety, Tsu said. Izuku, he said, shooting a worried look at his nephew as he continued fighting a monster made to kill All Might. He can handle himself. Come on, Sensei. Don't be irrational. Aizawa looked at her before letting out a pained laugh. Hate it. When logic is used against me, he grunted as Tsu used his capture scarf to tie him to her back. After she grabbed Hound Dog with her tongue, she leapt for the entrance. You'd better be okay, problem child, was Aizawa's last thought before passing out. Seriously, Shigaraki complained. Not even a single drop of blood? Damn it. Guess I'll have to do this myself. Nomu, hold him. Izuku tried to dodge, but Nomu was too quick. It grabbed Izuku and was holding him up by his head. As Shigaraki approached, Izuku did his best to pry the monster's fingers off. Unfortunately, every time he managed to break them, they simply snapped back into place. Now let's see how tough you are, Shigaraki said as he put a hand to Izuku's chest. Izuku watched in horror as his shirt began disintegrating into dust and watched it spread to his jacket. However, what caught both him and Shigaraki off guard was the fact that his skin seemed unaffected. The fuck? Shigaraki shouted in disbelief. While he was distracted, Izuku took the opportunity to kick Shigaraki in the face. Oh, you little fucking cheater, Shigaraki grunted, getting up and scratching his neck as blood began leaking down from under the hand on his face. Nomu, crush his skull. And do it slowly. While Izuku couldn't feel the pain, he felt the pressure behind his eyes as Nomu began squeezing with both hands but refused to show any signs of discomfort. Instead, he glared down at the villain. As he started to hear what he assumed was his skull begin to crack, he saw the mist villain appear beside Shigaraki, looking worse for wear. Geez, what the hell happened to you? Shigaraki asked. Before Kurogiri could respond, there was a loud boom and the two doors as well as large chunks of ice flew from the entrance. There's no more need to fear, a loud, booming voice called out as a tall figure stepped forward. Because I am here. Izuku couldn't help his shit-eating grin as blood began trickling out his nose. Fucking finally, Shigaraki sighed. Nomu, get rid of that trash. It's time for the final boss. Nomu threw Izuku away, but the boy was suddenly back up at the entrance. What took you so long? Izuku tiredly asked his mentor as he was placed near Aizawa and Hound Dog, who had both gotten basic first aid. Kept you waiting, huh? The symbol of peace returned the joke. Deku, Uraraka yelled as she and their other classmates ran to check on him. All Might, Izuku said, trying not to pass out. Careful. The big guy, Nomu, multiple quirks, shock absorption, healing. Hands guy can disintegrate with touch. Misty can portal. All Might's eyes widened in worry for a moment before he smiled down at young Midoriya. Thank you, my boy. Now rest and allow me to take care of these villains. With that, All Might leapt down into the main plaza. Izuku tried to get up to join the rest of his classmates on the edge of the steps to get a good view of the fight, but was stopped by Aachen. Deku, if you try to get up again, I will use my quirk to throw you back to school, she scolded. Hey, Aachen, he tiredly said, a delirious smile on his face as he started to doze off. You wanna go out, Sardi? He then succumbed to his injuries and passed out, Completely oblivious of the state of shock he had left, a red-faced 𝗬𝗏𝗏 Izuku slowly opened his eyes to what he was sure was the ceiling of a hospital room. He then winced and tightly shut his eyes at the pain he felt shoot through his head. It felt like his skull had been 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. Opening one eye, he looked to his left and saw his trusty yellow backpack was next to him on a side table. On his other side, Ochako was snoozing in the chair closest to him. He couldn't help smiling at how cute she looked while asleep. Across from the foot of his bed was a love seat his dad was sitting on while muttering and filling out some paperwork. Then, Recovery Girl came shuffling over to 𝗬𝗏𝗏, followed by Hime and Aunt Emmy. "Wake up, young lady," she said, gently nudging her with her cane. 𝗬𝗏𝗏 tiredly muttered as she woke up. "I'm sorry, dear, but it's almost curfew and you need to get back to the dorms. Ms. Joke will drive you back and you can visit him tomorrow." "Okay, thanks," 𝗬𝗏𝗏 said while stretching. She froze when she saw Izuku looking at her. "Hey," he tiredly said with a lazy wave. "Hey," she said back, face suddenly turning red for some reason. "Izuku," his dad said, dropping his work and rushing over to his son's bed to pull him into a hug. "Oh, thank Cammy you're all right." "Hey, Dad," Izuku said, returning the hug. "Where's Mom?" "Getting food," Hisashi said, not letting go of his son. "She'll be back dash." "Izuku!" Inko cried, dropping the food at the doorway and running over to join her two boys' embrace. Looking between them, he saw his cousin approaching with a sickly sweet smile and a hand behind her back before she was stopped by Aunt Emmy's hand on her shoulder. "Hime," the pro warned, taking the knife she was hiding. "I was only gonna stab him a little," Hime pouted. "Hey, I helped save Tsu," Izuku said, starting to sweat. "That's why I was only gonna stab you a little, dummy," Himiko said, glaring at her cousin. 𝗬𝗏𝗏 then cleared her throat. "I'll wait for you downstairs, sensei," she said, awkwardly waving as she backed towards the door. "I'm glad you're okay, Deku. See ya tomorrow." And with that she was gone. Weird, Izuku thought, unaware of his parents and Emmy sharing a look and smiling. "Well, we better get going," Emmy said, pulling her glaring daughter out and waving to her nephew. "Glad you're okay, kiddo." "We ain't done, Izukin," Hime called back. "Now then," Recovery Girl said, hopping up onto a chair and turning on her tablet that showed 2 X-rays. "Let's discuss your injuries, young man. For starters, the creature broke one of your ribs while cracking 3 more when he smacked you away. You can also see a diastatic fracture as well as 3 linear fractures along your skull. Will I be able to play the saxophone again?" Izuku tiredly joked. "Well, at least the pain medication is working," Recovery Girl said, shaking her head. "Luckily, thanks to your quirk, there shouldn't be any lasting damage. You'll just need a kiss tonight and tomorrow morning to finish the healing." "Thank goodness," Inko sighed in relief. "What about everyone else?" Izuku asked, his eyes suddenly widening with worry. "Are Uncle Sho and Inui-sensei all right? What about Kaken and Hitchan?" "Your friends are fine, son," Hisashi calmly assured. "All of the students made it out with only a few scrapes and bruises. As for Sho and Inui, they're right down the hall. I'm sure you'll be able to visit them tomorrow, right, Chio?" Recovery Girl nodded. "They'll be fine. Now time for your goodnight kiss, young man." After the retired pro delivered a kiss to his forehead, the pain in his head began to fade away while his vision began to swim. "Good night," Izuku tiredly said. "Good night, baby," Inko said, giving her son a kiss of her own on his head. "Night, son," Hisashi said, ruffling his hair as Izuku finally stopped fighting to stay awake and allowed himself to drift off. The next morning, Izuku was munching on some of Recovery Girl's gummies while on his phone. Class 1A chat. "𝗬𝗵𝗲, hey y'all. I live. 𝗬𝗵𝗲, RG just got finished healing my cracked skull and ribs. Ultimately, Class R. Mr. Faith. Creation Queen. It's a relief to hear you've already made a full recovery. Master Chef, thank Cammy. Insomnicat, told ya he'd be fine smirking face. Shock Top, glad you're okay, dude. V Metal Queen, 𝗏. Punch Monkey, 𝗏. Face, 𝗏. Tentaculio, 𝗏. Legs for days, Carrot Ribbit. Rock Shark, Tisu told us what happened. Rock Shark, you were both so manly. Flexed biceps, flexed biceps, flexed biceps, loudly crying face, 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 loudly crying face. 𝗃𝗏𝗧𝗏, I am glad you are all right, my friend. I'm truly sorry my reinforcements didn't arrive until after you and our teachers had already sustained serious injuries. 𝐿𝐴𝐼𝐺𝐻𝗀𝗄, shut up engines. 𝗫𝗏𝗺𝗺𝗀𝗄, not your fault. Deku was a reckless idiot. 𝗫𝗏𝗺𝗺𝗀𝗄, the frag were you thinking, Deku? 𝗓𝗵𝗏, I think we both know he wasn't face with open mouth, dashing away unamused face. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, grinning face with sweat. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, how's everyone else doing? 𝗧𝗵𝗲, I know Uraraka, Mina, Sato, Siro, Kaminari, and Shoji escaped the warp mist. 𝗎𝗏𝗏, Yamina came up with a great plan to take out the mist guy. 𝗎𝗏𝗏, Sato and 13 distracted the mist guy while Mina, Siro and me used that team-up move you suggested. Master Chef. Then Uraraka negated his gravity and I uppercut him into the ceiling, then put him in a chokehold when he fell. Master Chef. It was only because that bastard elbowed me in the balls that he got away. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, oof, worried face. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, still, great work thinking on your toes, Mina. 𝐿TC hey, it was your team-up move. 𝗎𝗏𝗏, but you're the one who remembered it. �smilewface, yeah, I was so scared I could barely think. Master Chef, Master Chef, and I doubt me and 13 acting as a distraction was part of Midoriya's team-up notes. Rockshark, just accept the praise, grinning squinting face. Rockshark, you've always been so manly in high-stress situations. 𝗬𝗏𝗺𝗃𝗃, you guys. Loudly crying face, 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 loudly crying face. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, so where'd everyone else end up being warped to? Creation Queen. Jiro, Shinso, and I ended up in the mountain zone. Mountain zone. So, Shinso drawled, pointing one of his tonfa at the villains. Which of you gutter punks is first? He, Momo, and Jiro had formed a tight 3-person circle, standing back to back to back. As Momo finished the protein bar she had eaten after making Jiro a sword, she used her quirk to create a staff for herself. Oh, tough guy, huh, one villain sneered. Yeah, I'll bet you have a weak-ass quirk if you need weapons, another with a mole mutation said as his claws lengthened. Probably trying to look tough in front of the girls. A villain with a skull mask said as electricity sparked from his hands. Why would I do that when I have someone as easy as your mother? Shinso responded. He heard Yamamoto gasp from his left and Jiro snort from his right as the electric villain seemed to spark more violently. Oh, you are 𝗔𝗏𝗧𝗏. Before activating his quirk, Shinso loudly smacked his tonfa together. Izuku gave him the idea to mask his quirk requirements. Use your quirk to take out as many of your buddies as you can, Shinso said. The villain then turned to his fellow villains and held out both hands as they began discharging electricity. 𝗬𝗏, wait 𝗬𝗏. The other villain was cut off as a wave of electricity shot through him and several of his comrades, disabling them. 𝗓𝗵𝗏, we were able to take the rest down before the teachers arrived. The Metal Queen. And Yamamoto took out a guy with a mole quirk by knocking him out /her staff when he popped up behind us, rolling on the floor laughing, rolling on the floor laughing, rolling on the floor laughing. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, grinning squinting face, rolling on the floor laughing, grinning squinting face, beaming face, with smiling eyes, rolling on the floor laughing, rolling on the floor laughing. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, how about everyone else? 𝗵𝗃𝗃, me and 𝗂𝐴 ended up in the downpour zone. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, since he didn't have any animals to help and I could be seen in the rain, we hid until the teachers arrived. 𝗵𝗃𝗃, unfortunately, I caught a cold sneezing face with thermometer. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, sorry to hear that frowning face. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, I'm sure our resident chef wouldn't mind fixing you some chicken soup. Master Chef, already on it, Bossman grinning squinting face thumbs up. Punch Monkey, I ended up in the conflagration zone by myself until Press Mike popped up. Punch Monkey, he was amazing. Punch Monkey, for someone dressed head to toe in leather he's pretty fast. 𝗓𝗵𝗏𝗏, I know right? 𝗓𝗵𝗏𝗏, in the 7 years I've known him, I still have yet to beat him in both quirked and quirkless combat. 𝗧𝗵𝗏𝗏, wanna share where you were cackin'? 𝗧𝗵𝗏𝗏, I'll understand if you'd rather not, pensive face. Lord 𝗲𝗄𝗧𝗏, I ain't no pussy, death. Lord 𝗲𝗲𝗏, me, Sharky and 𝗵𝗃𝗲 got sent to the ruin zone. Darkest night. 𝗵𝗃𝗲? Ruin zone. Flameal. 𝗵𝗃𝗲 shouted as he blasted a villain away. No, he thought. Bwasm, he yelled as he used his blast to deliver a flying kick into another villain's gut. Damn it, that's not right either. Wimmy wham wham wazzle. Too fucking long. Damn it, these guys just keep coming. Kirishima said as the three students regrouped in the remains of a building. Indeed, it is a regular gala of goons, Tokoyami gravely stated. A goon gala, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 thought with a scoff. Then suddenly his eyes widened. Then his lips spread into a manic grin. He then whispered something as he exited the building. What did you say, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 bro? Kirishima asked. I said, 𝗵𝗃𝗲 started, grinning as he activated the Gatling function of his gauntlets and unleashed a torrent of explosions on the villains. 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 concerned look before the former just shrugged and jumped into the action. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, the excited redhead cried as he charged forward, bulldozing through the villains. I like those guys, Dark Shadow happily said from behind their host, catching a villain with a chameleon mutation who tried to stab him from behind and smashing his face into the ground. What a mad banquet of darkness, 𝗃𝗁𝗵𝗲 said, shaking his head. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, I'll reserve judgment until I hear your battle cry in person. Lord 𝗃𝗄𝗄, like I give a damn what you think. Lord 𝗃𝗄𝗄, anyway, after cutting through the last of those idiots like toilet paper, we made our way to the plaza and watched All Might take that monster down. 𝗧𝗏𝗏, yeah, it was super manly. 𝗧𝗏𝗏, that hands guy was gloating about the monster being able to take his punches, so what does AM do? 𝗧𝗏𝗏, punch him harder. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, can't believe I missed that loudly crying face, loudly crying face, loudly crying face, loudly crying face. 𝗧𝗵𝗲, speaking of, what happened to Handyman and Misty? 𝗧𝗵𝗲, please tell me the pros got him. Folded hands, folded hands, folded hands, folded hands, folded hands, folded hands. 𝗧𝗏𝗏, about that grinning face with sweat. Main plaza. Plus Ultra Aya. All Might shouted as he delivered a final uppercut, sending the creature flying through the roof of the USJ and into the sky. Bakugo, Kirishima, and 𝗃𝗁𝗵𝗲 just looked on in awe from their hiding spot. Even Todoroki, who had arrived around the same time, knew better than to get in the way of the number one. He had to create a wall of ice to protect himself from the shockwaves being produced by the fight and had to reinforce it twice. Damn, All Might grunted as the dust settled. I really must be getting weaker in my old age. It took over 300 mighty blows to take that monster down, whereas in my heyday, it would have taken only 5, 6 tops. All Might felt the steam radiating off of him. I need to end this now, he thought, turning to the two remaining villains. Your monster has been defeated. Surrender. The one with hands all over him was scratching his neck furiously and whining about how he was lied to and how All Might must have cheated. The students' eyes widened in horror as they witnessed the villain use his quirk on one of his minions, who screamed as he was disintegrated. We didn't even get the chance to use our ultimate cheat cause someone got pawned by a bunch of noobs, he screamed at the mist villain, who was bowing his head in shame. My apologies, Shigaraki Tamura. I tried my best, but All Might was faster than anticipated. However, all is not lost. All Might has clearly weakened. We can still end him. At this, Shigaraki stopped scratching and looked at All Might, really looked at him. Nomu may not have been able to hold on to him for Kurogiri, but he still managed to damage him. He saw the hero's muscles trembling and smiled. Crap, All Might thought, not daring to move lest he risk transforming back into Yagi. Are they really going to call my bluff? Meanwhile, the boys watching noticed some of the underlings begin to get back up. Hey, bro, Kirishima grinned as his arms hardened. Let's let All Might handle those bastards while you, me, and 𝗃𝗁𝗵𝗲 take out the small fries. But 𝗃𝗁𝗵𝗲 was unsure about the nickname. He nodded and summoned Dark Shadow. Meanwhile, Bakugo kept his eyes on his hero. He knew about the time limit and could see the steam mixing with the dust. He knew what he had to do. Just as Shigaraki began running towards All Might, Bakugo blasted forward. "Don't you fucking touch him, you bastard," he shouted, rocketing above the villain and his hero. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 was ready to pull the pin on his gauntlet and blast the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 away when a portal opened in front of his face and a hand shot out. Time seemed to stand still and 𝗵𝘃𝗲's life flashed before his eyes. Thankfully, before the hand could touch him, a bullet pierced it. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 landed roughly and looked back up at the entrance, where engines and the teachers had gathered and 𝗧𝗵𝗲sensei's gun was still smoking. "Sorry, we're a little late," the weasel said, his tone as chipper as usual while perched on 𝗵𝗲sensei's shoulder. "You would not believe the traffic on the way here. However, we are here now." Suddenly, some of the other villains who had gotten up were being taken down by ectoplasm clones while others were bursting into laughter before one got kicked in the balls by a very pissed-off Ms. Joke. "No, the handjob said, gripping his bleeding hand and backing away. "Damn it, we were so dash." He was cut off as Present Mike, followed by Tails, used his quirk to blow him and Misty back, with Snipe taking the opportunity to shoot handjob once more in each limb before Misty warped them both away without another word. Small Might, damn it. Small Might. So, does anyone know what happened to Todoroki and Aoyama? The Metal Queen heard Todoroki ended up in the landslide zone and froze everyone. Small Might, shocker expressionless face. Sparkles, I cannot stop twinkling Sparkles. As for moi, that is a secret. Face with hand over mouth, face with hand over mouth, face with hand over mouth, starstruck beaming face, smiling eyes beaming face with smiling eyes, face blowing kiss. Izuku shook his head and smiled. After saying he was glad everyone made it out okay, he put his phone away and took out his notebook and colored pencils and began sketching. He finally had an idea about what he wanted his logo to be. Not too much later, he heard a knock at his door and saw Uraraka enter. Her face wasn't as red as it was last night, but her blush marks were definitely darker than they normally were. "Hey," he said, putting down his notebook. "Hey," she said back, sitting in the same seat as yesterday. "How are you feeling?" "Better," he shrugged. "Recovery girl finished healing me and my quirk's been active for." Izuku looked at his new watch Recovery girl gave him from Nizu. 57 minutes. "How about you? I heard you helped take down that Misty guy." I didn't really do that much," she said, nervously looking at her index fingers as they poked together. "Mina and the rest did most of the work. I just made him float. Besides, he and his boss still escaped." She made a small eep sound when Izuku held one of her hands and smiled at her. "Hey, you helped Sato knock him into the ceiling and kept him disoriented. I'd say that was pretty helpful. And so what if they got away? I'm sure the pros will find them soon. Speaking of, have you visited Hound Dog or Uncle Show yet?" "And not yet," she said, looking away again. I wanted to talk to you about something first." At Izuku's nod, she took a deep breath and continued. "I don't know if you remember, but before you passed out you kinda asked me out." "Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry, Aachen," Izuku finally said, face as red as Ochako's and waving his hands frantically. "I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I guess I wasn't since, you know, a monster crushed my skull, but I was thinking earlier about how warm you make me feel and you're so cute and pretty and fun and dash." Izuku finally shut up and both teens looked at the other's red face. "It's okay," she said, looking at the floor and smiling. "I've, kinda had a bit of a crush on you for a while. I just didn't want my feelings to distract either of us from our studies. Plus, I didn't think someone as cool as you'd be into someone like me." She finally looked up and into his wide, green eyes. Do I really make you feel warm?" she asked. Gulping, Izuku nodded. So, do you still want to go out on Saturday?" Ochako finally asked. "Yes." Izuku immediately said. "I mean, if you want to. You don't have to dash." "I do," she said, excitedly nodding and giving him a bright smile that he gladly returned. After about a minute of looking at each other, they jumped when they heard a loud, crinkling sound. Leaning against the doorway was a smirking Hime, a crushed and empty blood bag in her hand. "Did I come at a bad time?" she smugly asked. Sho had made many mistakes over the years. However, his biggest one was growing content. He had fallen into the same trap he constantly warned his students about. He was too used to fighting D-rank gutter trash that the handy guy caught him off guard. He had let his hair come undone in the fighting, and the bastard noticed his tail, striking when he had to blink and destroying his elbow. Then, the bastard sicked his pet monster on him, crushing his back and breaking his arms like raw pasta. He hated to admit it, but if it wasn't for Problem Child, he'd probably be dead. Instead, he's lying in bed with casts on both his arms, a brace for his back, bandages around his head, his leg in a sling, and a catheter up his, well, you know. Next to him, 𝗵𝗲 was lying in his bed with a cast on his arm and gauze in his mouth, scheduling a dental appointment on his phone. Knock knock, 𝗵𝗲 said as she entered. How's it going, boys? How does it look like it's going? Sho tiredly asked his wife while 𝗵𝗲 gave a mute wave. Ah, poor little Sho, 𝗵𝗲 cooed as she snuggled up next to him and started playing with his hair. Does he need a kiss from Mama to make him better? Sho groaned as 𝗵𝗲 made a gagging sound. No, but I apparently need several kisses from the old bat, Sho sighed, trying to shake his head free but wincing from the pain. But, can you do me a favor? Anything for my brave hero, 𝗵𝗲 said, kissing him on his scruffy cheek. Could you call up 𝗵𝗏 and put her on speaker? 𝗵𝗲 cocked an eyebrow at this, but shrugged and did as he asked. Hello, 𝗵𝗏 answered. Hey, 𝗵𝗏, Sho paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. Is that offer to cut my hair still on the table? After the USJ, all students were given the rest of the week off and even allowed to visit their families if they wanted. While most students took advantage of the offer, Uraraka was unable to do so due to the cost of travel. She was banking on getting into UA because they covered the tuition of hero students, and it being a boarding school made it so she didn't have to worry about living alone in a cheap apartment near the school. However, she was currently wishing she had asked if the costs of travel could be covered by the school because she was freaking out. She had a date with the coolest boy in school the next day and had no idea what to expect. How nicely should she dress? Would he be expecting her to wear makeup? Should she kiss him? It was all too much. Sure, she could call her parents, but it wouldn't be the same as having someone there to hug her and reassure her everything would be okay. Sighing, she decided to call and meet up with someone who knew Izuku well enough to help. Thankfully, she was also still on campus. In fact, her whole family lived on campus. Ochako was waiting on the couch in the 1A common room when the front door was kicked open. Standing there was a grinning Himiko with arms full of clothes. Come on, Akakun, she said, marching over and yanking Ochako to the elevator. Let's get you ready for Izuku. Meanwhile, Izuku was having a freak out of his own. All of his classes with Nizu and training with Uncle Sho hadn't prepared him for something like this. He was pacing and muttering to himself in his room back home, trying to come up with the perfect date when there was a knock at his door. Opening it, he saw his dad. Are you okay, son? Hisashi asked. Your mother and I heard you muttering from the living room. Sorry, Dad, Izuku said, his cheeks going pink. Just a little worked up about something. Anything I can help with? Hisashi asked, eyebrow raised. Would you happen to know where to take a girl on a first date? Izuku said in a hushed tone. Ah, Hisashi nodded, closing the door behind him as he entered his son's room and sat on his bed. I see. Well, what do you know about her? What are her likes, her interests, her favorite foods? Well, Izuku started, sitting next to his father. Her favorite food is mochi and she likes outer space. There you go, Hisashi said with a nod. There's a planetarium in Niigata and I'm sure you can find a restaurant nearby that sells mochi. Isn't that a bit simple? Izuku asked. That's what a first date is supposed to be, Hisashi shrugged. Your mother took me to a zoo with an exhibit on quirked animals for our first date. You'll have plenty of time to think of more elaborate ideas to show how much you care. Just keep it simple for now, enjoy each other's company, and see if you both want to go on more. Alright, thanks, Dad. Anytime, pal, Hisashi said, giving his son a side hug before getting up. When he got to the door, he was surprised to see a puddle start to form underneath it. He then sighed and opened the door to see his wife standing there with tears streaming down her face. My little Izuku's going on his first date? Oh boy, both Midoriya men thought, sweat dropping. The next day came and Izuku was on his way to the 1A dorms. Aizawa had sent out an email to all his students saying they can skip this week's Saturday training, but he would be back by next week. While he was always ready to train, he was happy he wouldn't have to worry about Aachen being too tired to go to lunch. He was wearing jeans and a black belt, his classic red shoes, and an open red plaid, button-up shirt over a tucked-in light gray, short-sleeve shirt with the words t-shirt written in kanji on the front. Though his mother groaned at his choice of undershirt, his dad grinned and gave him a thumbs up. After all, if Aachen couldn't appreciate his sense of humor, well, he just hoped she could appreciate the joke. Upon entering the dorms, he saw 𝗧𝗧𝗄 waiting for him on the couch. She quickly stood up upon seeing him. She was wearing her pink sneakers, black leggings, a blue skirt, and a light pink blouse. Oh man, she's so hot, they both thought. Hey, he said, voice cracking and causing him to blush. Hey, 𝗧𝗧𝗄 nervously giggled back. She noticed his undershirt and let out a snort. Really, Deku? 𝗧𝗧𝗄 asked, a hand over her mouth as she tried not to laugh while pointing. Hey, I like this shirt, Izuku said with a smile, glad she was only teasing. You look great by the way. You too, she smiled, while adding under her breath, even with that dumb shirt. He rolled his eyes as she grabbed her brown jacket and Izuku led them out the door. So, where are we going? 𝗧𝗧𝗄 asked. Niigata, Izuku said. I found a nice restaurant before heading to our main destination. And that would be? A surprise, Izuku said, smirking down at her. Jerk, she said, giving him a light shoulder check. Man, he is solid, she couldn't help thinking as he pulled out his phone. So, this restaurant takes orders through their app. I figure if we order now and you don't mind me napping on the train, we can both enjoy our meals before my limit runs out. Is that all right? Yeah, that makes sense, she nodded, taking his phone and looking over the menu. And don't worry about the cost, Izuku said, smirking at 𝗧𝗪𝗄's widened eyes at the fat stack of folded yen he pulled out of his pocket. How the where dash, she sputtered, almost dropping his phone. A gift from Nizu, he said, pocketing the cash. He's been selling my analyses for years and putting the earnings in a savings account for me to access when I graduate. He must have heard about our due date because he gave me an envelope and told me to enjoy a small portion of the fruits of my labors. After the shock had worn off, 𝗧𝗧𝗄 smiled. In that case, I'ma get me some sushi, she happily said, making Izuku smile. After placing their orders, they continued talking until boarding the train. You sure you don't mind me napping? Izuku asked, a little embarrassed. I'd just like to enjoy the food, you know? Go right ahead, she said, smiling at him. With that, Izuku closed his eyes and soon dozed off. He was then woken up by 𝗧𝗧𝗄 poking him and he quickly realized his head was resting on her shoulder. Sorry, he said, shooting straight up and once again going red. Don't worry about it, 𝗧𝗧𝗄 chuckled. Come on, we'd better get going if you want to taste our lunch. Thankfully, the restaurant Izuku found, 𝗧𝗵𝗲, was only a 5-minute walk from the station and they were served shortly after being seated by a large, stoic man with long, spiky black hair and a scar on his cheek. Think he used to be a pro? 𝗧𝗪𝗄 asked as she snapped her chopsticks and tried to decide what to eat first. I doubt it, Izuku said, snapping his own chopsticks. This place mostly employs reformed villains. That made 𝗧𝗪𝗄 almost choke on her onagi. Wait, really? Yep, Izuku nodded. The owner is a former villain himself and knows how hard it can be to find work. He opened this restaurant to give a second chance to those who genuinely want one. But how can he be sure they aren't just taking advantage of his kindness? 𝗧𝗪𝗄 asked, a little wary of her food all of a sudden. The co-owner has a truth quirk and is always present for the interviews, Izuku said, taking another bite of his katsudon. This is probably the second best I've had. And what's the first? 𝗧𝗪𝗄 asked, already having a guess. My mom's, of course. Called it, she thought with a smile as she dipped a California roll in soy sauce. After leaving a sizable donation to a charity for reformed villain housing, the couple left. Man, that was so good, 𝗧𝗪𝗄 said, stretching. I just wish I had saved room for 𝗏𝗍. Well, we can get 𝗏𝗍 later, Izuku said. For now, it's off to our main destination. After walking for a bit, Izuku looked down at 𝗧𝗪𝗄. Mind if I ask you a personal question? Sure, she said. What's up? Why do you want to be a hero? He asked. He noticed her flinch at the question. You don't have to answer, he started before she put on a fake smile and frantically waved her hands in front of her. No. It's fine really. It's just, she turned away and continued in a hushed voice. I mainly want to be a hero, for the money. She closed her eyes and waited for his disappointed response. However, what she got was a hand on her shoulder. Looking up, she saw him smiling down at her. There's nothing wrong with that, he said. I'll admit, it was a little surprising, but why shouldn't you want to be paid well for helping people? It's not for me, she said as they started walking again. Remember at the entrance exam, when I said my parents sacrificed a lot for me? Well, they own a construction business and it's not doing too well, hasn't been for a while now. I originally wanted to work for them since my quirk could help cut down on so many costs, but my dad said they wanted me to follow my own dreams and they'd be happy with a trip to Hawaii. So, you're saying you wanted to be a hero even before then? Izuku asked, smiling at Ochako confused look. You just said your dad wanted you to focus on your dream, so you must have wanted to be a hero before getting the idea to work for them. After all, there are plenty of other, less dangerous ways of making money. When did you decide you wanted to be a hero? Ochako thought for a minute. I guess, it was the first time I saw a hero in person, she said, smiling at the memory. Gallant Knight had taken down a villain and the crowd was going wild, including my parents. It always made me sad to see them so tired all the time, so it made me so happy to see them so happy. I guess, I wanted to make people happy too? Izuku nodded, satisfied. He knew there was more to her answer. Even if there wasn't, that wouldn't have mattered to him. His best friend wanted to be a hero to show he was better than everyone else, but still wanted to do so by helping people. What about you? Ochako asked. I've just always wanted to help people, Izuku said. Even if I never got my quirk, my uncle always said that I'd be the world's first quirkless hero. Ochako then decided now would be a good time to learn something she's been meaning to ask her boyfriend. Hey, Deku, mind if I ask you a question about your quirk? Go right ahead, Izuku easily nodded. What's it like when your quirk kicks in? I mean, is it instant or do you slowly lose feeling? Does it start from anywhere in particular? Izuku took a moment to think about this. It's kinda like getting Novocaine pumped through my whole body. Like, right now, my nerves are shutting down, but I can still feel the pressure under my feet as we walk. It just kinda happens all over until I feel nothing. Except for how I apparently make you feel warm, she teased. Izuku let out a nervous chuckle at that. Soon enough, they made it to the planetarium and, once again, Izuku couldn't help smiling at Ochako's excitement. She was bouncing on the balls of her feet as they checked out the exhibits before the show started. Looks like Dad was right, Izuku thought as he turned and saw Ochako looking up at the show with open-mouthed awe. After the show, he and Ochako found a stand that sold mochi and Ochako got 2 strawberry mochi and a green tea one while Izuku just got a bottle of water. You sure you don't want one for later? Ochako asked, wiping the rice flour from her lips as they began walking to the station. I'm sure, Izuku said. So, did you have fun? Are you kidding? I had a blast, Ochako beamed at him. Gotta say, it's gonna be difficult to top this next time. So, there's gonna be a next dash. Izuku was cut off when something darted out of the alley they were passing and ran into Ochako's leg, knocking her into him. Looking down, they saw a little girl sitting and practically trembling where she fell. She had long, unkempt bluish-white hair, large red eyes staring up at them, and a horn on the right side of her forehead. She was barefoot and wearing what appeared to be a hospital gown. However, what worried Izuku and Ochako the most was how both arms and legs were wrapped in bandages. Hey, are you okay? Ochako asked, crouching down. When she offered her hand, the girl flinched back. She's terrified, Izuku thought, also crouching down. Hey, it's all right, Ochako said, putting on a smile and speaking softly. We're not gonna hurt you. I'm Ochako and this is Deku. What's your name? A gruff voice called from the alley, making the girl flinch again and run into Ochako's arms. Help me, she whispered. Izuku and Ochako shared a look. Damn it, the boss is gonna be pissed if we don't find her, Hojo said, looking inside a dumpster. We'll find her, Setsuno said, flipping his blonde hair back. As they exited the alley, they saw a kid with short, scruffy green hair looking down the sidewalk. "Hey kid," Setsuno said. "Have you seen a little girl run by here? Has red eyes, white hair and a horn?" "Oh yeah," the kid said, pointing a thumb in the direction he was looking. "She went that way. I tried to stop her, but she just kept running." "Are you her parents?" "No, we work for her father," the bald man with the white face mask said, pushing past the kid. "Come on, Setsuno. She's heading in Officers Temi and Yaro's direction." "Thanks, kid," the blonde with a brown leather beak mask said, patting the kid's shoulder as he followed Hojo. "And sorry for my associate's behavior. Our boss will kill us if anything happens to Eri." "Hey, I get it," Izuku waved with a smile. "Hope you find her." Once the two men were gone, Izuku's smile dropped and he looked up to the rooftop where Ochako and the girl, Eri, were hiding. Upon climbing the building, Izuku saw Ochako comforting Eri, her jacket draped over the little girl who was eating the strawberry mochi like it was the most delicious thing she ever had while Ochako stroked her hair. As he approached, Ochako looked up and Izuku almost fell over at the amount of sheer hatred and anger he saw in the normally bubbly girl's eyes. "We can't let them find her," Ochako said in a shaky voice, wiping away her angry tears. Nodding, Izuku brought out his phone. The local police were out if those creeps were working with them and they might have more guys checking the hospitals. "Hello, Midoriya," Nizu said in his chipper tone. "How can I help you? Is your day with your future mate going well?" "It was," Izuku said in a serious voice. "What happened?" Nizu asked, all cheer gone from his voice. "We were on our way to the station when a little girl bumped into us. She was shaking like a leaf and asked us to save her when we heard someone calling for her. Ochako got her on top of a building and I sent the two guys that were looking for her in another direction. They said she was their boss's daughter, but my gut was telling me they were lying. Also, they've apparently got the police working either with or for them." "I see," Nizu said, the sound of keys typing in the background. "You are in Niigata, correct? What did these men look like?" "One was tall, bald and had on a white face mask. The other was about my height with blonde hair and he wore what looked like a brown leather plague mask." "A plague mask?" Nizu asked, the clacking of keys coming to an abrupt halt. "Oh dear. Sir?" "Izuku, listen to me carefully. I will send Fukukado to pick you up, but you three need to meet her near the prefecture's border. Can you do that?" "Of course, sir," Izuku said, looking down at Eri, who had moved onto the green tea mochi. "Good. You'll need to keep to the rooftops and move quickly. Also, put in your earbuds. I've hacked into the city's cameras and will let you know if I see anything." After getting the address where his aunt would meet them, he relayed the information to Ochako. "Can you use your quirk on you and Eri?" Izuku asked, taking off his red shirt and tearing it. "I can still carry you both, but this will make it quicker." "Of course," Ochako said. "Why you're gonna use your quirk on me?" Eri worriedly asked, taking a step back. "Don't worry," Ochako said, smiling at the girl and showing her finger pads before touching her own arm and making herself float. "My quirk just makes things lighter. It won't hurt, I promise." While still a little apprehensive, Eri raised a shaky hand and Ochako took it. Suddenly, Eri felt weird and as she began floating, she started to panic. "It's okay," Ochako said, pulling the girl into a hug. "I've got you, Eri. I've got you." "All right, that should do it," Izuku said, having tied his torn shirt into a sort of harness. "Akin, get on my back." Nodding, Ochako floated over and allowed herself and Eri to be tied up. "Okay, everybody ready?" Izuku asked, tightening the makeshift harness and looking back with a smile. "Ready," Ochako said before smiling down at the little girl tightly clinging to her. "You ready, Eri?" After a moment, Eri gave a nod. "All right, here we go," Izuku shouted, running and jumping to the next roof. And then the next. And then the next. Every now and then, Nizu would give him an alternate route. However, it wasn't long before he made it to their destination. Looking down the edge of the building, Izuku saw the Volkswagen pull up to a screeching halt. "You can turn off your quirk, Akin," Izuku said. "We're taking the express elevator." What does that mean?" she nervously asked as she pressed her fingers together. The response she got was him shooting her a mischievous grin and all color drained from her face. "Hang on tight, Eri." Izuku happily said before jumping from the roof. "I'm here, boss," Miss Joke said into her phone while looking around. "But I don't see Dash." She was cut off by her nephew giving a piggyback ride to his girlfriend and a little girl landing in front of her, cracking the concrete. "Never mind," she sighed, hanging up the phone. "Hi, Auntie," Izuku happily waved. Over his shoulder, Ochako was waving nervously while clutching a bundle of bluish-white hair. After a long moment, Emi let out an amused snort and pulled out a knife. "Just get in the car, problem nephew," Emi said, cutting the harness and releasing the girls from Izuku's back. "Come on, Eri," Ochako said, Izuku pulling the front seat forward so they could get in. Is she nice too?" Eri nervously asked, watching as Emi got in the driver's seat. "She's super nice," Izuku smiled as he buckled the girls in, with Eri still clinging to Ochako. "She's a hero." "You bet, little unicorn," Emi cheerily said. "Call me Ms. Joke." "What's a unicorn?" she whispered, causing Ochako to hug her tighter. As soon as Izuku was in his seat, Emi slammed the gas and they burned rubber out Aniga. When they got to the hospital, Eri was nervous about being checked over by the doctors. It took a while and Ochako and Izuku sticking by her side, but a single doctor finally began the checkup. What they found made them sick. Eri was underweight and slightly anemic. However, what horrified everyone was what was hiding under her bandages. The myriad of scars resembled a road map. When Detective Tsukachi arrived and asked about them, she told them her quirk was a curse and someone named Overhaul needed her blood to create a cure for quirks. As it turned out, Overhaul, aka Chisake Kai, was the head of a branch of the Yakuza known as the Shai Hakai, known for their trigger smuggling operations. Now, they could add child abuse and human experimentation, a literal war crime, to the list. It took every ounce of Izuku's self-control to not run back to Niigata and tear the prefecture apart to find and torture that Overhaul bastard. If Ochako's face was any indicator, she seemed ready to do the same. Unfortunately, Eri had to stay in the hospital. However, both teens promised to visit her the next day and had given her a green rabbit stuffed animal they bought from the hospital gift shop. They stayed with her until she fell asleep, hugging her new toy. The two of them were sitting in the waiting room, waiting for Emi to finish her talk with Tsukachi about raiding the Shai Hakai compound. So, Uraraka awkwardly began, resting her head on Deku's shoulder. "Where do you want to go next time?" Izuku couldn't help snorting at this. Their first date may not have ended the way he planned, but she still wanted there to be a next time. Overall, he'd say this date was a success. The next day, Kai was breathing heavily and facing away from the bloody smear on the wall that had once been his two subordinates who were supposed to be watching the little diseased wretch. "Damn it," he growled, his face breaking out in hives. "Where the fuck is he?" Suddenly, an alarm blared and the entrance to the catacombs had been blown open. A group of heroes had stormed the compound and were being led by a very pissed-off Big Green, who had quickly dispatched 𝗧𝗵𝗲 with a single punch. The rest of the 8 bullets, as well as Mimic, were also easily dispatched. Kai and Kurono had grabbed whatever research they could and ran for the exit tunnels. They were nearly there when something had grabbed and pulled Kurono back down the corridor and around a corner. Kai heard his right-hand man scream in pain, begging for mercy until there was a crack followed by a deafening silence. Then, someone dressed like a butler rounded the corner. "Hello there," 𝐒𝐻𝗄 politely said with a sharp, predatory grin. Kai let out a wordless growl and made to use his quirk on the wall when the British undergrounder twitched his left pointer finger. Just before reaching the wall, all 10 of Kai's fingers went flying off. After a brief moment of shock, Kai screamed in pain and desperately tried to stop the bleeding as the angel of death slowly approached him. "I must say, Mr. Chisake, it takes a special kind of evil to bring me out of retirement," 𝗬𝗄 said, his wires shining in the light while adjusting his black gloves. "I almost turned down Big Green's offer to join this little raid until he told me what you did to young Mistress Eri. After hearing how you manipulated and tortured, both mentally and physically, a 6-year-old child, draining her of several pints, possibly even gallons of blood per day, all in some vain attempt to play God, well, how could I resist?" "Get away from me," Kai shouted, trying to get up but slipping on his own blood. He looked back and froze. He finally realized who he was dealing with. 𝗓𝗍𝗃, 𝗧𝗏 said, a glint in his eye as he towered over his prey. Your angel of death has arrived. 5 minutes later, 𝗧𝗏 reported that 𝗓𝗍𝗃 was dead. I didn't even know the Yakuza were still around, Sato said. Indeed, Tokoyami nodded. I too believed All Might had snuffed out their particular brand of darkness. While the students returned to the dorm Sunday night, the Shai Hakai raid was still all the students of 1A were talking about the next morning. After being in hiding for so long, I can't help but wonder what they did to get the hero's attention, Yamamoto said, thumb and forefinger under her chin. Ida, your brother was part of the raid team, right? Siro asked. Yeah, did he tell you anything? Kaminari asked. While my brother did not say anything to me, I did, accidentally, mind you, overhear him speaking to my mother about war crimes being committed, Ida said. This had ignited a new conversation about what war crimes a branch of the Yakuza could be involved in. Meanwhile, the tiresome trio, plus Uraraka, were staying pretty quiet. Ochako and Izuku had decided to keep their involvement quiet for both Aries' safety and to keep their budding relationship on the down low for now. However, Shinso and 𝗵𝘃𝗲 had found out what happened after the latter overheard his mom talking with Inko about Deku going on his first date with Cheeks. While neither were gossips like Pinky or Invisigirl, they had to know how their best friend's first date had gone. When they cornered and asked him about how it went, he told them the whole story. Both boys had different reactions. While 𝗵𝘃𝗲 exploded, demanding to know how Deku's origin story was turning out better than his own, Shinso just shook his head and said, figures you'd turn a date into a rescue mission. Shortly after the second bell, their sensei entered. While many were expecting a substitute, the trio weren't surprised to see Aizawa with both of his arms in casts with his right in a sling and walking to his podium with a slight limp. What did surprise them, even Izuku, was his hair. Gone were the long, messy locks tied in a ponytail. It was now a short fade similar to his nephew's, though the still messy hair on top was more spiky than Izuku's fluffy curls. The sides were also buzzed short enough to fade into his face stubble and reveal 3 bald spots that appeared to be shrapnel scars above his left ear. While Kirishima thought they looked manly, he knew better than to ask his teacher about them. Maybe Midoribro would know? Morning, everyone, Aizawa said in his usual tired drawl. Sensei, it is good to see you doing well, Ida said, standing up and bowing. Agreed, but are you sure you are well enough to teach, Sensei? Yamamoto asked in a slightly worried tone. Thanks for your concern, but I'm fine. Also, the first person to mention my hair will get detention for the next month. Aizawa smirked into his capture scarf as Ashido flinched and lowered her hand. Before I get to a few announcements, I'd like to commend you all on how well you all held your own at the USJ. However, with a grunt, Sho bowed as far as he could while wearing the back brace under his costume. I also apologize on behalf of UA for allowing you all to be put in such a situation. We have and will continue to implement new and improved security measures to hopefully prevent those villains from using that warp quirk to catch us by surprise again. Straightening back up, he gave the class a serious look. Now, first of all, every one of you are required to have at least one session with Hound Dog, so please talk to me about scheduling an appointment. Second, you've probably noticed 2 of your classmates, Todoroki and Hagakure, are absent. Izuku had noticed Todoroki's empty seat, but he had only just noticed the invisible girl's seat was empty as well. He then remembered her leaving early that morning to talk to Power Loader about her costume. Due to Todoroki's reckless actions at the USJ, as well as his overall attitude when questioned about the incident, he has been expelled from the heroics course and transferred to Gen Ed. That had shocked everyone. Todoroki, the son of the number 2 hero, was expelled? Like I told you all on day 1, we here at UA don't care who you or your family are, Aizawa said, his narrowed eyes flashing red for a second. If I think you're not suited to be a hero, it is my right to transfer you to another course or even expel you from the school if necessary. Now, as for Hagakure, as if on cue, the door once again slid open. Standing there was a nervous-looking girl with a messy bob cut and thick eyelashes wearing a UA uniform and a strange choker. However, what really made her stand out was the fact that her entire body was a translucent teal blue and slightly glowing. She looked almost like a hologram. Was that her quirk? Who is she? Hey, everyone, the girl nervously said in a familiar voice. After a moment, Mina shot up from her seat, black and gold eyes as large as dinner plates. 𝐎𝐻𝑝𝑃𝑗𝐻𝑒, she shouted in surprise. This was followed by several more gasps and sounds of surprise before being silenced by Izuku's glare. 𝐎𝐻𝑝𝑃𝗲, would you like to explain or would you rather I did? Izuku kindly asked. I'm fine doing it now, she said, still looking at the floor and nervously playing with the choker. Midoriya-sensei helped me realize my quirk wasn't just invisibility, but refracting light. So, while Power Loader-sensei wasn't able to find a way to turn my quirk off, he did figure out a way to make me visible. She then pressed the jewel on her choker and everything but her clothes once again became invisible. Upon pressing it again, her body began glowing again. Basically, the choker emits a light that bounces around my body, making me visible. My new costume has a similar feature, but Majima-sensei had this made for everyday use. How do I look? Beautiful, Sato found himself uttering first, making everybody's eyes shoot towards him and causing him to blush. The big guy's not wrong, Kaminari said with a wink. Glad to finally put such a cute face to such a pretty voicey. Now's not the time for your corny flirt routine, idiot, Jiro grumbled, pulling back her jack from Kaminari's ribs. Jiro, no using your quirk on Kaminari. In front of me, Izuku lazily said. You look amazing, girl, Mina happily said, running over and hugging her best friend. I find myself blinded by your shimmering beauty. Aoyama excitedly said, standing and giving an extravagant bow. With each new compliment, 𝐎𝐻𝑝𝑃𝗲's cheeks turned a darker shade of teal and she had started to tear up. Thanks, guys, 𝐎𝐻𝑝𝑃𝗲 said with a wobbly smile as she wiped her eyes and took her seat. All right, Izuku said, getting the class's attention again. Next order of business, the sports festival is coming up in 2 weeks. Hell yeah. Katsuki cheered with a manic smile. All right, Kirishima grinned, pumping a fist. Wait, seriously? Kaminari asked with a look of shock. Doesn't it seem a little too soon after the whole villains breaking in and trying to kill us thing? Jiro asked. Sounds pretty irrational to me, Shinso piped up. Believe me, I agree, Izuku sighed. Unfortunately, the administration thinks this will be a good show of strength and we will be significantly beefing up security this year compared to others. While I would have preferred the event be rescheduled, I do understand the need for it. Over the years, the UA Sports Festival has replaced the Olympics as the most watched sporting event in the world. This is your first of only 3 chances to not only make an early name for yourself in the eyes of the public, but to also show off to countless pros looking for potential future prospects. So, make sure you train hard and try not to embarrass the school. Sensei's right, everyone, Izuku said, standing up and addressing his classmates. This is a major opportunity we can't afford to waste. So, let's give it our all. Izuku couldn't help the smile he was hiding as the class cheered. All right, settle down, hellions, Izuku said, waving the class down with his casted arm. Now let's dash. Izuku shoulda. Everyone, even Izuku, jumped as the door slammed open to reveal a scowling Ms. Joke. What the hell do you think you're doing out of bed? She practically shouted as she stomped towards a suddenly sweating Izuku. I don't want to hear it, mister, Emi said, grabbing Sho by the ear and pulling him towards the door, thoroughly embarrassing him in front of his students. Chio said you needed to stay in bed for another week and that is where you are going to stay with 2 more of me watching over you. And before you go blaming him, Jean didn't rat you out. You can thank Nettie for what happened to your clone. 1A just watched dumbly as their homeroom teacher, a badass pro hero who had risked his life for them, was pulled out the door by his ear while being scolded like a child who was caught sneaking out after curfew. Once the sounds of the scolding and string of monotone **s faded down the hall, Bakugo burst out laughing. I'm sorry, but what the hell was that? Sato finally asked. That, my friend, was the smile hero, Ms. Joke, Hitoshi said, closing his eyes and putting his hands behind his head. But I know her as Aunt Emi, Izuku said, smiling as he watched things click into place for several of his classmates. The door then slid open again and in walked a familiar face that made Yamamo's and Hitoshi's eyes widen for different reasons. Apologies for my tardiness, class, The older man bowed. My name is 𝐬𝗫𝗓 𝗏𝗏. Straightening up, his monocle glinted in the light. However, you may call me 𝐒𝐻𝑝𝑒𝗏 sensei. I will be your substitute homeroom teacher and have recently taken over as head of UA security. I do hope we get along swimmingly. While Yamamoto beamed at the news, Hitoshi's throat went dry and he broke into a cold sweat. Later, as Izuku and his group of friends were on their way to the cafeteria, they ran into Mr. Yagi. Ah, young 𝗵𝘃𝗲 and Midoriya, Yagi said, smiling. Just the two young men I was looking for. All Might would like to invite you both to join him for lunch. What I say? After sharing a look, 𝗵𝘃𝗲 shrugged while Izuku looked back at Ochako. Go on, she nodded with a smile. Yeah man, Kirishima grinned. It's not every day you get a lunch invitation from All Might. Izuku smiled back and both boys began following Mr. Yagi. Man, they're so lucky, Sato said as the group continued to the lunchroom. I wonder what All Might wants with them, though, Ochako wondered. Well, they both acted like reckless idiots at the USJ, Shinso shrugged. Maybe it has something to do with that? Maybe a thank you followed by a lecture? That could very well be, Ida hummed. He might want to talk to them about another community project, Yamamoto chimed in. Then again, if it was something to do with a project like Takoba, I'm sure Hitchan would have been invited. As Hitoshi tried not to blush at Yamamoto using that nickname, nobody noticed the recently transferred Gen Ed student eavesdropping. Upon entering the break room, Izuku and 𝗵𝘃𝗲 were surprised to see Vlad King, Nizu, Big Green, and Hisashi Midoriya waiting for them. Ah boys, welcome, Nizu said, pouring 2 more cups of tea. Now that you're here, we can begin. Wait, what are the boys doing here? Hisashi asked, Big Green's eyes narrowing at Yagi. Yeah, Vlad chimed in, arms crossed. I was under the impression we'd only be discussing potential candidates, not that you already narrowed it down. Relax, guys, Yagi said, putting up his hands in a placating manner. Young Midoriya and 𝗵𝘃𝗲 are aware of One for All, but aren't in the running for it. I offered it to young Midoriya after the sludge villain attack, but he turned me down. However, given how much time they spend with a few of the candidates, I figured their insights could prove useful. Wonderful, Hisashi sighed in exasperation. For the record, I'd have liked to have known my son and pretty much nephew were in on a 200-year-old conspiracy. Right? Sorry, Yagi said, sweat dropping and smiling guiltily. But, to be fair, I did tell Aizawa about them knowing. As Yagi sat down and took a sip of his tea, he seemed to look around the room for something. Speaking of where is Aizawa? Both 𝗵𝘃𝗲 and Vlad couldn't help letting out a snort, the latter of whom having heard his fellow homeroom teacher being reprimanded as he was being dragged past 1B. Aizawa will be bedridden for the next week, Piccolo said, holding up 5 folders. However, he gave me his choices of candidates and reasons for each. But before getting into that, we should get the boys caught up on everything since the USJ. Your time has gone down again, hasn't it? Izuku asked, worriedly looking at his hero. It was the fight with that brainy 𝗵𝘃𝗏, wasn't it? 𝗵𝘃𝗲 asked, glaring down at his tea. I'm afraid so, Yagi sadly nodded. I'm down to an hour and a half a day, maybe 2 if I really push it and don't use any actual power. I was hoping to find my successor before the sports festival, but due to recent developments, I feel it might be better to wait a while longer. What developments? Izuku asked. All Might gave a defeated sigh, rubbing his side where his scar was. Do you boys remember when I told you about how I lost my stomach to a villain nobody knew about? Well, that villain was not only my arch-nemesis, but the arch-nemesis of every past holder of One for All. He went by the name of his quirk, All for One. Yagi then gave a brief history of All for One's true connection to One for All and how their last battle ended. Unfortunately, it would appear he somehow survived, Yagi said, gripping his cup tighter. Only he could be responsible for creating a creature with multiple quirks. Mark my words, boys, I will find and end that monster for good. However, Nizu chimed in, we all agree it would be for the best to have a backup plan ready just in case. Hence, the need for a successor. And if you passed it on before the sports fest, the 𝗵𝘃𝗏 could easily figure out the student who suddenly manifested a powerful strength quirk is the new OFA holder. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 nodded in understanding before turning to Vlad. So, who were you thinking, 𝗵𝘃-sensei? Ignoring the nickname, Vlad produced 5 student files: Kaibara, Kendo, Tetsu, Yanagi, and Shishida. I took many factors into my top 5 choices, Vlad said, passing around the files. Their motivations, body types, character, and, of course, quirks. Hisashi hummed, placing 2 files to the side. I wouldn't recommend Yanagi. Her quirk is already powerful and adding 𝗲𝗏 to it could cause brain damage. Shishida's beast state could also prove problematic. Tetsu's quirk is similar to Kirishima's, Izuku muttered. Could make it easier for him to use more of 𝗲𝗏's power without getting hurt. Then again, steel seems less reliable than hardening, and Kaibara's quirk could prove devastating with the added power. I can't say much for the spinning extra, but man hands could be a good choice, Bakugo said. While I respect Lash's strength, he doesn't have the right head for what you're looking for, Yagi-sensei. Alright, so we've narrowed it down to 2 from 1B. Let's move on to 1A, Piccolo said, distributing his own files. Aizawa's choices were Azui, Rikido, Ojiro, Kirishima, and Uraraka. We could probably cross Akin off the list, Izuku said. After all, she wants to be a rescue hero, not a fighter. Well, then we might as well cross legs off too, Bakugo said. She wants to specialize in water rescue. Kirishima could work, though. Wow, using his actual name, Izuku joked in mock shock. You must really respect him, Kakin. Shut up, Deku, Bakugo snapped back. What are your thoughts on young Rikido or Ojiro? Yagi asked. They both definitely have the right build to handle your power, Piccolo nodded. I'll have to look more into how all of their quirks work to see if there'd be any hidden risks, Hisashi said. It might also be wise to set up some one-on-one meetings between them and All Might, Nizu chimed in. Agreed. Welp, I'd say that's enough business for now, Yagi said, putting the 5 maybe folders to the side and smiling as he brought out several bento boxes. Let's eat, everyone. Himiko was ready to kill. No, really, she was gonna kill that blonde prick. It was almost the end of the day and Monoma was trying to rile up the class and get them to confront 1A for daring to get on the news for surviving a villain attack at the USJ. She just needed to ignore him until the bell rang and she could meet up with her mom to visit that darling unicorn at the hospital. Dude, seriously, just let it go, 𝗏𝗏 tiredly said while copying Yanagi's notes. I will most certainly not. Monoma yelled, slamming his hand down on Away's desk. Those 1A vermin need to be reminded of their place. Just because they were lucky enough to be attacked by villains doesn't mean they get to dash. Thunk. Monoma's eyes widened as he looked down and saw a knife stuck in the desk between his fingers. Slowly turning to his right, he saw Fukukado, angry tears pricking the corners of her eyes as she bore her fangs. Fukukado, Vlad King yelled. However, Himiko didn't hear him. All she knew was she needed to hurt this pathetic, ugly little stain. Lucky, she practically snarled as she stalked forward. Lucky? They all almost died, you bastard. My cousin watched my dad's arms get snapped like kindling and then almost got his skull popped like a fucking zit. How the fuck is that lucky? Himiko, stop, Kendo said, getting between the snarling girl and the arrogant blonde, who was currently frozen in fear. Please, you need to calm down. I know you're angry, but he's not worth it. Looking up at her friend, Himiko broke down and pulled the class rep into a hug and began to cry as 𝗏𝗏 floated a hand over to rub calming circles into her back. As this happened, every other student shot a glare at the still frozen blonde. Monoma jumped as a large hand fell on his shoulder and looked up to see his homeroom teacher looking down at him with a disappointed expression. Come with me, Vlad said in a tone that left no room for argument. But, sensei, Fukukado dash. Monoma began to sputter before being cut off by Vlad. I'll deal with her later, Vlad said. Right now, you and I need to have a talk with Nizu. Reluctantly, Monoma followed his teacher to the principal's office. Hey, Deku, could you help me train for the sports fest? Ochako asked as they were packing their things. Of course, Izuku smiled. Just let me figure out a schedule and we can get started as soon as tomorrow. Anything in particular you're hoping to dash? What the dash? Izuku and 𝗀𝗧𝗄 both looked up at Mina's cry to see a large gathering of students outside their classroom, blocking the doorway. "Excuse me, but can we help you?" Ida asked with a small chop. "Isn't it obvious?" Katsuki said, walking towards the door with an arrogant smirk. "They're scoping out the competition. After all, we are the ones who survived a real villain attack, and these extras obviously wanted to see a real future pro." "Kaken, knock it off," Izuku sighed, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder and getting in front of him to speak to the crowd and do damage control. "Sorry about him, folks. He does not speak for us. I'm the class rep, Midoriya Izuku. Can I help you all with something?" "Yeah, you can go ahead and quit right now and make room for someone who's cool enough to be a real hero," a lisped voice shouted. Looking down, Izuku, Katsuki, and 𝗀𝗧𝗄 saw a short boy with purple orbs on his head resembling a mohawk openly ogling 𝗀𝗧𝗄, making said girl shudder in disgust. "Oh, I see I'm already making you quiver, baby," the perverted grape-headed boy said, wiggling his eyebrows. "How about after I win the sports festival, I give you a taste of my homemade grape juice?" Suddenly, the class rep stepped in front of the curvy babe and Mineta felt a sudden pressure as the tall boy glared down at him. "Talk to my girlfriend like that again and I will crush every last drop of juice from your grapes. Got it?" Quickly nodding, Mineta burst into tears and ran away while swearing to kick all their asses in the festival. "Sorry about him," another boy with spiky brown hair and ovular pupils sighed before giving Izuku's challenging grin. "But he was right that you all better watch your backs, 'cause me and him are gunning for the hero course." "Well, I wish you the best of luck," Izuku smirked back. "Wait, what are they talking about?" Kaminari asked. "The entrance exam isn't the only way into the hero course," Hitoshi explained. "Take me and Aizawa-sensei, for instance. Our quirks are useful against people, but aren't suited to taking down giant robots." "Ah, I see," Ida said, fist slamming down into his open palm. "So, the sports festival isn't just a chance for the hero course to show off, but to give those who failed the entrance exam a chance to prove they deserve a seat as well. But wouldn't that normally mean someone from our course would need to be moved out to make room?" 𝐻𝐸𝐿 worriedly asked. "Not since the weasel took over," Bakugo said, getting bored and beginning to push his way through the crowd. "Even if Izuku wasn't expelled, 1A and 1B are allowed a total of 5 transfers each before needing to move anyone. Now, if all you extras are done gawking at us, I need to hit the gym. Come on, Sharky. Let's go pick up lashes. Right behind ya, Baku bro." As the crowd began to disband, Izuku saw the red and white hair of their former classmate. Todoroki just stood there, glaring coldly at him as Izuku met his glare with a look of indifference. "Can I help you, Todoroki?" Izuku asked, making the other boy's eyes narrow further. "Consider this my declaration of war. I don't care how powerful you are or what your connection to All Might is. I will beat you and prove that transferring me was a mistake." Once Todoroki had left, Izuku turned to 𝗀𝗧𝗄, whose blush marks had reddened significantly. "You okay, Akin?" Izuku asked. "You called me your girlfriend," she quietly said. Upon remembering what he said to the grape, Izuku once again resembled a strawberry. He didn't even register the twin squeeze from Mina and 𝐻𝐸𝐿 2 weeks till the UA Sports Festival. Just like most everyone else, Uraraka was uncomfortable. No, it wasn't because of her costume. Taking Deku's suggestion, she talked to Majima-sensei and was now wearing a new costume that fit much better. The color scheme was the same, but the fabric was much less form-fitting and she now wore an armored breastplate made of a shiny, plastic polymer with a padded midsection that resembled the quilted material of 13's costume. Her boots and gauntlets were also similar to her old ones, but now contained thrusters that would allow her to control where she flew when weightless. Unfortunately, this feature was unavailable to her until Majima-sensei had trained her to properly use them. She also had a new helmet with a liftable pink visor. On her back was the backpack containing straps and harnesses for civilians that Deku had designed with a small oxygen tank and rebreather attached to the top for when she would be able to fly at higher altitudes. Strapped under her backpack was her new weapon in the form of a high-density mallet with an extendable handle. Finally, Her belt had a white infinity symbol in the center of it and a hidden compartment that held a strong anti-nausea medication she got from Recovery Girl. No, her new costume was perfect. She was feeling uncomfortable because Class 1A was returning to the USJ. They had all been given the option to attend a theoretical class if they felt they weren't ready, but everyone had decided to attend the practical lesson. Still, Uraraka couldn't help feeling uneasy. The memories of helping bandage her sensei's mangled bodies and the sight of her crush, the toughest person she knew next to All Might, passed out with a bloody nose were still fresh. In an attempt to distract herself, she observed the costume changes from some of her classmates. Mina had new gloves that matched her boots with an aperture in the palms that narrowed and widened for different streams of acid. She also had a backpack system to hold stronger acid with tubes that ran down to nozzles on the backs of her gloves. Talking to Mina was 𝐒𝐻𝐈, whose costume had changed the most. She kept her white gloves and boots, but she now wore a holographic pastel pink bodysuit that disappeared with the rest of her body when she turned off the light function. Kaminari had gotten a pair of sleek silver and yellow gauntlets that worked similarly to Bakugo's. They stored larger amounts of electricity so he could use big attacks without shorting himself out. They also shot out projectiles to help direct his electricity to specific targets. Sato's costume had gone through some changes that were purely cosmetic. His gloves and boots were now a charcoal black with 2 yellow stripes near the cuff of the gloves and 1 near the top of the boots. His utility belt and the part of his cowl covering the top half of his face were also the same dark color, giving him a bee motif to go with his use of honey as his new main source of power. Ojiro also added a fur collar that matched his hair and tuft of fur on the tip of his tail to his gi and 2 round studded cuffs to his tail sleeve. Ochako was then brought out of her thoughts by someone giving her hand a squeeze. "You okay?" Izuku asked, a concerned look on his face. "Yeah, I'm good," Ochako nodded up at him, her fake smile falling as she looked away. "Just, Yeah, Izuku nodded, giving her a wide smile she could tell was forced. "But it'll be different this time. Nizu and Majima-sensei have added all that new security and Garrote-sensei will be there. Yamamo and Hitchan have said his reputation as an underground hero makes Uncle Sho look like All Might." While Izuku's smile shrunk, it became much more genuine. "Besides, you handled yourself fine last time and I'm sure you'll do even better with that boomstick of yours." That made her chuckle. "I told you, I'm not calling it that," she said, giving him a playful shove. "And I told you, I refuse to stop calling it that," Izuku said, giving her a wry smile back. Seeing his job of cheering up his girlfriend was done, Izuku made his way to the front of the group to direct his classmates onto the bus. In doing so, he gave everyone following him a good look at his new logo on the back of his new jacket, the top half of a green skull with 3 cracks in it with the initials MD under it. He had taken an injury from a near-death experience and turned it into his logo. "He's so freaking cool," was all a blushing Uraraka could think. Thankfully, due to Big Green shooting down All Might's original dumbass idea, 1A's first rescue training session went off without a hitch. 1 week, 4 days till the UA Sports Festival. Hitoshi let out a grunt as he fell on his back. He saw the metal staff coming down and rolled out of the way just before Yamamo could pin him. "Almost had me there," Hitoshi panted as he got back up and into a battle stance, facing a nowhere near as exhausted-looking Yamamo. Yagi-sensei had decided today's lesson would be 1-on-1 quirked sparring matches. He also said they couldn't wear their costumes or use support equipment, which meant he couldn't use his tonfa. Normally, this wouldn't be much of a problem for Hitoshi. He was proficient in several forms of martial arts and he was good at getting other people to talk, even if they knew his quirk. Unfortunately, not only was his opponent also trained in several forms of fighting, but her whole quirk revolved around making whatever weapons she needed. Add on to the fact she was smart enough not to fall for any of his subtle and not-so-subtle jabs and bad jokes Ms. Joke had taught him, and he was screwed. Then, he noticed one of his classmates watching and an idea came to him. I was tempted to stay down since it meant I'd get to be underneath you." He smiled, trying to sound smooth and channel his inner midnight even as his cheeks turned a soft shade of pink. "I'm not too ashamed to admit I'd probably make a terrible top." "Shinso?" Yamamo gasped, face turning a deep shade of red and eyes widening before going blank. "Gotcha," Hitoshi said, sighing in relief. Please, walk out of the ring. She then did just that. Winner, Shinso. Yagi-sensei announced, making his friends cheer. As Yagi-sensei announced the next match, Hitoshi nervously approached 𝗵𝗲𝗄, whose head was hung in shame. Sorry if I embarrassed you there, Hitoshi said, looking away and rubbing the back of his head. I just, was running out of options. I couldn't land a hit on you and you weren't responding to my comments or jokes, so I thought I'd give Kaminari's lame flirting a try. Don't worry, Shinso, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 sadly smiled. I'm not upset at you. It was a good strategy, really. I just can't believe I fell for something so simple. So, we're cool? Of course, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 said, more genuinely smiling as they began making their way back to their group. And, for the record, she softly said, winking at Hitoshi. I'm sure you're a wonderful top. Momo couldn't help giggling at Hitoshi, nearly tripping over himself at the comment even as her own face began heating up again. Back with their classmates, 𝐎𝐸𝐽 and Mina were begging a snorting Jiro for information. 1 week, 2 days till the UA Sports Festival. 8 a.m. was way too early for Aoyama to be up. Saturdays were supposed to be to get caught up on his beauty sleep. However, Aizawa-sensei had made it quite clear when he transferred Todoroki that he needed to get better or he'd most likely be the next one gone. If the son of the number 2 hero wasn't safe, no one was, and he knew that despite how flashy his quirk was, it could make him a liability. If he got transferred, he may decide he was a useless asset and then his parents, he had to get stronger. For Maman iti Papa, he sadly thought. Upon entering the gym, he saw Midoriya, Shinso, and Bakugo as well as that Fukukato girl from 1B, facing Uraraka, Tokoyami, 𝐎𝐸𝐽, Koda, Jiro, Tsu, Sato, Kirishima, and Kaminari. Morning, Aoyama, Midoriya said, waving him over. Bonjour, Midoriya, Aoyama said, with a yawn as he stood next to Kaminari. Excuses, 𝗬𝗍𝗵𝗲. I am not an early riser. Here, Jiro yawned back. You get used to it, Izuku said, clapping his hands. Alright, now that everyone's here, let's start out with some basic stretches. Just as they were finished stretching, and Bakugo had finished yelling at Kirishima for being too stiff, Big Green entered along with Midoriya-sensei. Alright, runts, listen up, he said, arms crossed. Until Aizawa returns, I will be overseeing this extra training. Any questions? No. Big Green then smirked and cracked his knuckles. Then let's get started. The first 2 hours had been dedicated to physical training. To start, they did 10 laps around campus, 30 push-ups and sit-ups, 10 for beginners like himself, and then were given a 5-minute break before beginning basic quirkless combat training. When it was time for quirk training, they were split up by Midoriya-sensei with their more experienced classmates and would divide his attention between them. Fukukato, or Hime as she preferred to be called, led Tsu and Uraraka to the pool. Uraraka was there for neutral buoyancy training and Tsu, Aoyama suspected, was there for Hime to ogle at in her swimsuit. Shinso wanted to help Jiro, Koda, Tokoyami, and Kaminari to further improve their hand-to-hand skills since he felt they already over-relied on their quirks. Bakugo took Kirishima and Sato since, in his own words, they were the only 2 that could keep up with him. Finally, Midoriya-san took Aoyama and 𝐎𝐸𝐽 to another gym so they wouldn't hurt anyone with what he had planned. He then paired Aoyama and 𝐎𝐸𝐽 up to test a theory of his that 𝐎𝐸𝐽 could redirect Aoyama's naval beam, which proved to be correct. The rest of their training involved Aoyama using his quirk on 𝐎𝐸𝐽 and the invisible girl redirecting his beam to different targets. By noon, Aoyama was thanking every deity that they were finished, and he was sure he wasn't the only one. However, he was sure all the pain and tummy aches would be worth it. His parents risked so much to give him the chance to live out his dream, and he would protect them, by any means necessary. 1 week, 1 day till the UA Sports Festival. It was Sunday and Shoyuda was finally allowed out of bed. Except for his right arm still wrapped up and in a sling, he was pretty much healed and he and his family were on their way to visit Eri in the hospital. She was nearly healthy enough to be discharged and Emmy was quite insistent on taking her in. Given what they found out about her quirk thanks to the research they recovered from the Shai Hakai raid, Sho had to agree it would probably be for the best that he was close to her. This be his first time meeting the girl, and he had admitted he was a bit worried his rough appearance might scare her. However, his wife and daughter assured him they'd warned Eri in advance that while he was rough around the edges, he was a good guy who wouldn't hurt her. Still, he figured it'd be better not to meet her in his hero costume. He had even left his scarf, something he took everywhere since graduating, at home. He was wearing his well-worn sneakers, loose-fitting blue jeans, and a pink put-your-hands-up radio shirt under a hooded brown leather jacket 𝗵𝗲 had bought him for his last birthday to replace that old ratty thing he used to wear. On the way to Eri's room, 𝗵𝗲 had once again been going on about how nice it had been in class in 1B's dorms since Vlad had booted that 𝗵𝗲 brat when an alarm went off and they saw a red light flashing above Eri's door. "What's going on?" Sho asked the nearest doctor while he and 𝗵𝗲 showed their hero licenses. "The patient is having an accidental quirk activation," the doctor said. "No one's allowed in the room until it's over." "I'll take my chances," Sho said, approaching the room. Cracking open the door, he saw the child on her bed with her legs pressed up against her chest and a pained look on her face. Her eyes were tightly shut and she was hugging her green rabbit and the unicorn plush 𝗵𝗲 bought her in one arm while her other hand was gripping her head just below her glowing horn, which was longer than it was in the pictures 𝗵𝗲 had shown him. Please stop," she whimpered. I don't want to make anyone else disappear." This was bad. Eri wasn't just afraid of her quirk, she was absolutely terrified, and the stress seemed to be causing her power to flare. Sho's first instinct was to use his quirk to shut hers down, but stopped himself. Looking down at his sling, he came up with an idea that could help show her that her quirk wasn't a curse, but a gift. "Doctor, what's her quirk radius?" he asked. About 2 meters, the doctor answered after looking at Eri's chart. "Daddy, what are you waiting for?" 𝗵𝗲 frantically asked. "Help her already." "I think he's about 2, 𝗵𝗲 said, watching Sho unwrap his arm and enter the room. Eri was rocking back and forth, begging her curse to just stop already when she heard her door open. Her eyes shot open and she saw a man that looked kinda like the picture she saw of 𝗵𝗲's dad, but with shorter hair and without his scarf. "Stay away," she screamed. "Why, you'll disappear." "Don't worry, Eri," he said softly. "I'm here to help. I'm going to turn off your quirk, but first, I want you to see something." Sho held out his arm. It had a nasty scar on the elbow and was a little crooked. He took a step forward and Eri, struggling to keep her eyes open, watched as the arm, only the arm, began to glow. Sho grunted as he felt his arm break again, but the pain was brief and as soon as it stopped, he activated his quirk. Almost instantly, Eri felt the itching pain fade and she touched her horn to make sure it was shrinking back to normal. Looking back at Sho, her eyes widened to see his arm looked completely normal. Did my curse do that?" she asked. "No, Eri," Sho shook his head as he sat down on the bed. "Your quirk did that. You are not cursed. You're a child with a powerful gift that you can't control yet, but I'd like to help you. However, in order for me to do that, you'll have to come live with me, 𝗵𝗲 and 𝗵𝗲. Would that be all right?" He quickly got his answer in the form of a tight hug that was soon joined by 𝗵𝗲 and 𝗵𝗲. 3 days till the UA Sports Festival. Today's heroics class will be an important one on hero informatics, Izuku explained, taking a dramatic pause. "It's time for you to pick code names." Several students excitedly cheered and Izuku thought he heard someone utter the F word. Flashing his quirk quickly put a stop to this. "We'd normally save this class until after the sports festival, but as is becoming the norm for this year, we're changing things up. Given the amount of attention we expect your year to receive, we feel it's necessary to offer you all the option to keep your civilian identities a secret to help protect you and your families. Hence, the need for code names," Izuku reasoned. "Correct," Izuku nodded. "Now, while you will have the option to change your names even after graduation, I urge you all to carefully consider them or dash. Or you might get stuck with something stupid like Eraserhead." Izuku groaned as the students turned to the open door to see a grinning Ms. Joke. As she entered, they noticed a little girl with a horn and a 𝗵𝗃𝗄 backpack nervously following closely behind her and hiding behind the pro's legs as she addressed the class. "Hey, kiddos," 𝗵𝗲 happily greeted with her thumb pointing to her chest. "As I'm sure my darling nephew and his friends have told you, the name's 𝗵𝗃𝗄 𝗵𝗲, aka the smile hero, Ms. Joke. Sorry I didn't have the chance to introduce myself last time, but a certain someone was being a major dummy and I needed to make sure he knew better than to try to pull a fast one on me again. She then shot a sickly sweet smile at Aizawa, whose red face was buried in his scarf. Isn't that right, sweetie? Yes, dear, Aizawa grumbled. He then glared at his class, sure he heard someone making a whip sound effect. Anyway, since Show isn't that good at coming up with names that aren't a reference to David Lynch films dash. I never even heard of that movie when Zashi suggested it, Aizawa muttered as he zipped up his bag. I'll be in charge of making sure your hero names are unique, fitting, and show everyone the kind of hero you want to be. Rip, who's the girl with you? Sue asked with a raised hand, causing said girl who had been peeking from behind Joke's legs to quickly duck back away. Oh, this is Eri, Joke said, kneeling down and exposing the nervous girl. She's recently become a ward of UA and I've been watching over her. Eri, would you like to go sit next to Show? Looking at the ground, the girl nodded. All right, pumpkin, Emmy softly said, gently ruffling Eri's hair before opening up her backpack and pulling out a hero-themed coloring book, crayons, and a pink sleeping bag. Go ahead. As she walked over to the wall Show was sitting against, she shot a quick glance at the class and saw Deku and Aachen smiling and waving at her. Once she was settled, Emmy passed out several whiteboards for the students to write down their names. After a few minutes, the first to show off their name was Aoyama. Brace yourselves, he said, holding the whiteboard over his head. The shining hero, I cannot stop twinkling. Well, it's certainly unique, Joke said, smiling as a bead of sweat ran down her face. But it's a bit of a mouthful. How about the sparkling hero, twinkling star? Oh, how about Sirius? Uraraka excitedly suggested. It's the brightest star in the sky and is Greek for glowing. Nice one, Joke said, beaming at Uraraka. What do you think, Aoyama? Say magnifique, Aoyama said, excitedly rewriting his name. Thank you, mon ami. I shall be the sparkling hero, Sirius. Oh, let me go next, Mina said as she practically skipped to the front. The acid hero, Alien Queen. Definitely a cool name, but it might be a little too scary if it pays tribute to the film I think it does, Ms. Joke said, looking over to Uraraka. Any suggestions, Stargirl? How about Venus? She shrugged, her pink cheeks darkening at the attention. Oh yeah, Izuku said. I remember the show at the planetarium mentioned how it rained sulfuric acid, making it the most acidic planet. Oh, I love it, Mina grinned, rewriting her name and then giving Ms. Joke a pleading look. How about the acidic hero, Queen Venus? Really holding on to that queen title? Huh, Joke chuckled. Alright, that works. Yes, Mina exclaimed, pumping her fist. On her way back to her desk, she sent a wave and teasing smile to Izuku and Ochako. Thanks, Izuoka, she said, giggling at their red faces. Alright, who's next? Emmy asked. Sue stepped up next. Ribbit, I've had mine picked out since grade school, Sue said. The rainy season hero, Froppy. Love it, Ms. Joke said, giving a thumbs up. No notes or revisions necessary. I would like to go next, please, Ida said, arm raised. I am the Recipro hero, Silver Streak. I'm a sucker for alliteration, Ms. Joke said, approving the name. Alright, let's just get this over with, Shinso sighed. I'm keeping it mysterious, huh? Joke asked. I considered Mindjacker or something along those lines, but since I'm going underground, it's more logical I keep my name vague and separate from my quirk. Makes sense, Joke just shrugged. The sturdy hero, Red Riot, Kirishima proclaimed, slamming his name down. Paying tribute to my old homeroom teacher, Crimson Riot? Joke asked with a fond smile. That's right. Wait, Crimson Riot was your homeroom teacher? Joke couldn't help laughing at the faux redhead's shocked and excited expression and approved the name. She knew Crimson Sensei would have loved this kid. Bakugu gave a cocky smirk before showing his name. The Shogun of Explosions, Dynamite. Nice use of consonants. Joke nodded in approval. What happened to King Explosion Murder? Izuku asked in faux sadness, getting snort from Hitoshi as Katsuki sat back down. You're one to talk, mighty old man, Katsuki sneered back. Touché. After Jiro, Shoji, Tokoyami, Koda, and Kaminari's names were approved, it was Sato's turn. I gotta say, after hearing everyone's names, Sugarman sounded a little bland, he said. So, I decided on the sucrose hero. Sweets? Very sweet kid. Ms. Joke said with another thumbs up. Hate to admit it, but I was in the same boat with Tailman, Ojiro admitted. I instead took inspiration from a story my grandpa used to tell me. I'm the tailed hero, Weeding. Nice reference. The refracting hero, Prisma, Hagakure proudly said. Very cool. The dispenser of justice, Cellophane. Zero beamed. Love the pun. I am the creation hero, Alchemist, Yamamo confidently stated. That's a big thumbs up for me. Alright, only the two lovebirds are left, so who's first? After sharing a look, Ochako went up first. Here's my name, she nervously said. The Zero-G hero, Uravity. Combining your surname with gravity. Love it. Sighing in relief, Ochako smiled at Izuku's thumbs up as she made her way back to her desk. Taking a deep breath, Izuku gave his class a serious look. For those of you that don't know, Kaken and I used to go to Aldera before we helped shut it down. Izuku ignored the sounds of surprise and continued. They tried to get us to embrace their stupid might makes right mentality, hoping to get the next all might and endeavor on their side. But we refused to drink their Kool-Aid, refused to allow them to corrupt us. Instead, we recorded their crimes, and this not only exposed them, but also led to the discovery that the Meta Liberation Army was still active and had other schools acting as indoctrination zones that were promptly shut down. That was when he showed his name. My name is a promise. I don't want to be the next All Might or a symbol, but I will make sure to be the best hero I can be. I am the incorruptible hero, Max Damage. The room was silent until Kirishima stood, fist shaking and tears leaking from his tightly shut eyes. Manliest ever, he cried out, inspiring others to cheer. Looking to his right, he saw his uncle still bundled in his bag but with a small, proud smile on his face, and Eri snuggled up next to him in her own bag, looking up at one of her saviors in awe. Well, it's no super all might, but I guess it'll do, Emmy teased, making Izuku sag and blush at the reminder his mom had shared his old list of hero names with her. Welp, my work here is done. Come on, Eri. Let's go get us a snack. After packing up her things and managing to wave goodbye to everyone, Eri followed Emmy out of the room as Aizawa said something about balancing training and resting before a festival in a few days. Emmy, what's a festival? She asked. It's a really fun event where the students get to compete and play a bunch of games in front of a bunch of people, Emmy said, smiling down at her. Will Deku and Ochako be playing too? And Himine, would you like to join me in the teacher's booth and help cheer them on in person, or would you rather we watch them at home on TV? The stadium can get pretty noisy. Emmy had to stop herself from squeeing at how cute Eri's thinking face was. I want to go with you to help cheer on Deku, Ochako, and my Nei-san, she nodded, a determined look on her face. All right. Emmy cheered, picking Eri up and putting her onto her shoulders. I'll let Mr. Nizu know you'll be joining us. Now, how about we go see if Mr. Lunch Rush has any machi? One day till the UA Sports Festival. Once again, exhausted from his training, Shoto was lying on his bed and glaring up at his ceiling. He found himself doing this much more often since moving to the 1C dorms. He still thought he did nothing to deserve this. 13 had little to no combat experience, so he acted. It's what a hero did. Still, the principal and Big Green didn't agree with his reasoning and had him transferred to the course full of nobodies that he did his best to avoid. He had no interest in socializing with his fellow hero students, so he was certainly not going to waste his time getting to know these rejects. After classes, he'd spend most of his time training in a private gym he reserved for himself and would return to the dorms when it was near curfew to prepare his meals in his room. He hadn't bothered to redecorate it like his 1A dorm since this was only temporary. Closing his eyes, he drifted off to sleep while thinking about tomorrow. He'd show all of UA they'd made a serious mistake. He'd prove he was the future #1 hero by taking Midoriya down and winning the festival with only his mother's ice. He'd show them all, Hello and welcome, everyone, to UA's annual first-year sports festival. As always, I am your ever-loving host, the voice hero, Present Mike. Joining me today is my good buddy, 𝗧𝗏𝗧𝗏. What the hell am I doing here? You won the coin toss with Midnight. Don't you mean I lost? Let's get started. Are you ready? The crowd loudly cheered. Come on, these kids deserve better than that. Mike playfully scoffed, leaning into the camera inside the booth and cupping his hand behind his ear. I said, "Are you ready?" Somehow, the crowd managed to cheer even louder. That's more like it. First up, we've got our local celebrities. I can speak from first-hand experience when I say these kids live up to their own hype. Give it up for the hero course students of Class 1A. Hearing their cue, Izuku and 𝗬𝗵𝗲 lead their class out of the tunnel and onto the field. He could hear Kaken talking to Kirishima about how the roar of the crowd was getting him fired up and wished he felt the same. While Izuku put on a mask of confidence, he was internally freaking out. Inui-sensei had helped him make some headway with addressing his fear of crowds, but he wasn't ready for an audience this big. And he was expected to give the student pledge? Sensing his inner turmoil, Uraraka made her way to the front of the group and got his attention before squeezing his hand. He couldn't feel it, of course, but the show of support helped calm him down and he shot her a grateful smile that she returned. Up next, we have another class of future heroes chock full of talent and just itching to prove their mettle. Please, put your hands together for Hero Course Class 1B. Looking to his left, Izuku saw their sister class led by Kendo and Shota. He and Kendo locked eyes, the redhead giving him a challenging smile and nod, which Izuku returned. Meanwhile, Hitoshi groaned and shook his head at Hime and Tokage waving and blowing kisses to the audience. Our next few classes may not be hero students, but that doesn't mean you should count them out. After all, our own Midnight was one of them. Let's hear it for General Studies classes 1C, D, and E. Almost immediately, Izuku spotted the red and white hair of Todoroki on the edge of the group of students. His heterochromatic glare would shift between himself and the stands. He also saw Monoma, whom the other Gen Ed students seemed to be giving space to. His hair was slightly disheveled and what he assumed was supposed to be a confident grin just looked manic, much more so than he remembered. Izuku had a feeling he'd need to watch out for him. Next, from the support course, we have the gremlins of classes 1F, G, and H. The next group were all decked out in various pieces of support gear and Mei was no exception. She was, of course, wearing her goggles along with some kind of apparatus that could be a jetpack on her back, a tool belt, and large, metal boots. Izuku and Bakugo shared a look and hoped none of her babies exploded on live TV. And finally, we have from the business course classes 1I, J, and K. Between events, please give their stands a visit. Now, let's give a final welcome to UA's first-year contestants. As the crowd cheered, Midnight stepped up onto the podium and the crowd went even wilder. Silence, she announced, cracking her flogger-style whip. Now, for the student pledge, will the incorruptible hero, Max Damage, please step up? Gulping, Izuku made his way to the podium. When he got to the microphone, he closed his eyes and took several deep breaths, constantly reminding himself he had Yagi-sensei's blessing, before opening them again and giving the audience an intense look. As I'm sure many of you are aware, All Might has recently been becoming less active as a hero and more focused on teaching. The reason for this is simple, he's getting older. Ignoring the sudden murmurs of the crowd, Izuku continued. He has been the symbol of peace and sole pillar of our society since before most of you were born. As scary as a world without All Might sounds, there's no way of avoiding the inevitable and it's illogical to think otherwise. However, he does have a plan and he's allowed me permission to share it with all of you. Izuku smirked. Turning to his fellow students, he raised his fist. What is your profession? He shouted. Izuku was glad his fellow reps explained his idea to their respective classes as almost every student responded by pumping their fists in the air and chanting 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏. Izuku then turned back to the crowd. We are All Might's legacy. Every one of my fellow students, not just the hero course, will have a role to play in creating a secure foundation for Japan's future. We are going to be the next pillars of peace and will make sure there will be many more after us. Today, we're here to prove ourselves worthy of such an honor by going beyond. Plus ULT, everyone cheered. Woohoo! That's my boy. Hisashi excitedly cheered from the teacher's box. Well said, young Midoriya, Yagi thought, smiling as he clapped his bony hands. Looking to his left, he saw young Eri was sitting on Emi's lap, clapping and cheering on Deku as loudly as she could. Her determined expression was too cute. Meanwhile, in a hero agency resembling an average office building, Sasaki Mirai was furious. How had Yue allowed such a blasphemous speech to air? This child was destroying All Might's image as the perfect hero he was. Society had been doing just fine with a single, all-powerful pillar. Why shake up the status quo and fix what wasn't broken? This was just further proof that Toshinori made a mistake. He had read up on the boy when he heard Toshinori was helping train a group of students and came to the logical conclusion that he was the ninth holder. While his quirk was powerful, it was obvious he lacked the drive to replace All Might if he felt he needed the help of others to pick up the slack. He was also reckless given how badly he derailed his investigation against the Shai Hakai. Instead of bringing that girl to the police, he took it upon himself to kidnap her. It didn't matter how the girl's testimony gave them enough evidence to get the raid approved for the very next day. It didn't matter that Chisake and several of his most dangerous subordinates were permanently taken care of. That boy had no right to ruin what would have been a shining moment in Mirio's career. No, this could not stand. He'd have to nip this problem in the bud. He'd make this max damage relinquish the sacred legacy that so rightly belonged to Mirio. Max damage, Mirai venomously muttered to himself as he began filling out an internship request. Sounds more like a villain name. Thank you, Max. Midnight said as Izuku made his way back to his class, fading in relief. Now, without further ado, let's get this party started. Everyone watched the Jumbotron as it shuffled through events until landing on Obstacle Race. Buajidi, Bajidi, Buajidi. Let's go racin'. Buajidi, Boog Wadash? The track is 4 kilometers around the stadium, Midnight explained. The first 42 competitors to cross the finish line will move on to the next round. So long as you don't leave the track or cause your fellow competitors any grievous injuries, you are free to do as you please. Now, take your places at the gate. As they did so, Izuku observed how the hallway leading to the outside narrowed and held Akin back. Trust me, he smirked and pointed ahead at her questioning look. It's better to stay back for now. Upon closer inspection, Ochako noticed the bottleneck and nodded. They then started discussing a plan of how they could work together to get through when they were soon joined by Shinso, who had his hands in his pockets. You guys noticed it too, huh? Shinso asked. Ochako was about to answer, but, upon remembering her classmate's quirk, suddenly slapped both of her hands over her mouth while lifting her pinkies. Shinso just smirked. Can't blame a guy for trying. Shinso lazily shrugged before walking ahead and talking to someone else. Izuku chuckled as Ochako let out a relieved sigh. Then, the lights above the starting gate began to count down. Red, red, green. Begin! Midnight announced. While everyone else was rushing forward, pushing and shoving, Izuku and Ochako just hung back, waiting. Suddenly, Ochako felt a blast of cold as they both observed what could only be Todoroki using his quirk to ice over the corridor and freeze several competitors' feet and legs to the ground. Todoroki's way too predictable, Izuku sighed before turning and hunching his back to Ochako. Ready to go? Let's do this, Deku. Ochako said, getting on Izuku's back and, on his command after properly angling himself, used her quirk on him. They launched forward and Izuku proceeded to bounce between the walls of the narrowing hallway, zigzagging high over the struggling crowd and through the exit as Uraraka released her quirk. As they landed, they were passed by several of their classmates, including a maniacally grinning Baku. You need to learn some new tricks, Icy Zuko. Gungalea. Incredible. While Todoroki of Class 1C, formerly of Class 1A, has taken an early lead due to icing over much of the competition, several others have managed to avoid getting the cold shoulder. In fact, 1s max damage and the 0G hero, 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗔 seem to be working together. I believe I can also spot some teamwork from several students of 1B. A smart strategy. Just because this isn't a team event doesn't mean the students can't work together. As Todoroki continued skating forward, he waved his right arm behind himself to slow his competition down with an ice wall. He heard it shatter almost immediately and let out a series of pained grunts as several chunks of ice hit him in the back, knocking him off balance and causing him to tumble forward and over himself several times. As he struggled onto all fours, Todoroki felt a strong breeze on his left. Todoroki growled as he looked up to see it was Midoriya and 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏. Oh, that's gotta hurt. Still, a perfectly legal move from 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏, giving her and max damage the lead. Todoroki saw the pair pause near a corner where Midoriya allowed 𝗬𝗏𝗧𝗏 to dismount. He took this as his chance to regain his lead and blasted forward on a path of jagged ice just like he had done at the recommendation exam and Izuku's QAT. He shot the two a look as he passed them, but this cost him as he was surprised by a sudden pain in his gut and was knocked back. Gasping in pain, Todoroki looked up to see the robots from the entrance exam, as well as 10 of what he could only guess were the 0-pointers. Pikes. It seems Todoroki just can't catch a break as he's the first to enter the Robo Inferno. Damn it, that was sloppy, Todoroki thought while dodging a 1-pointer's claw and using a pillar of ice to impale it. Too sloppy. I can't afford to look bad, especially while he's watching. I need to calm down and think. I need to show the power of my ice. As the others caught up and began engaging the smaller robots, he looked up and saw one of the 0-pointers had spotted him and was reaching down for him. 𝐻𝗄𝐵. That'll work. Todoroki then summoned a large wave of cold, freezing the robot as well as a few others, before it could reach him. Letting out a chilled breath, he continued forward without using his ice. He'd need to wait a bit to warm up after a move like that. As he ran through the giant's legs, he heard it creaking and decided to throw his competition a bone. After all, he didn't need the staff blaming him for someone else's stupidity. Careful, he called back. I froze that guy while he was off balance. As he cleared the thing, the 0-pointer collapsed forward. And Todoroki takes back the lead with a stunning display. This kid is really giving it his all to prove himself. I wouldn't say that, Izuku thought, watching as Todoroki still refused to use his fire to warm himself up quicker, forcing him to slow down and allowing Bakugo to catch up. No matter how well the boy placed today, if he still refused to use his flames by the end of the festival, he wouldn't be allowed back into the hero course. You good? Izuku asked, helping Ochako up after being knocked back by the gale force of the 0-pointer's collapse. Yeah, she nodded, hearing Bakugo's explosions overhead. Good. Now, go catch up to Todoroki and Bakugo. Right? Izuku smiled with a 2-finger salute. See ya at the finish line. With that, he was off, leaping up and scaling over the fallen 0-pointer. Ochako knew he would have been fine with carrying her all the way through the course, but she wanted to earn her spot on her own. She continued forward, dodging and weaving through the onslaught of robots as her classmates used this as a good opportunity to show off the offensive capabilities of their quirks. Look at these kids go. The sturdy hero, Red Riot of 1A and the hefty hero, Real Steel from 1B are just bulldozing their way through those poor bots. The striking hero, Battle Fist from 1B has crushed a Victory class bot's head like a soda can and whoa. Did the creation hero, Alchemist, just produce a working cannon? Geez, it's no wonder these kids made it into hero course with such amazing quirks. Quirks aren't everything, you know. Class 1B's B-positive hero, 𝗬𝗓 is progressing well by relying solely on her natural athletic abilities. The other students should consider themselves lucky she didn't request to bring her knives or sword. Cough, favoritism, cough cough. Shut up. Ochako touched a 1-pointer and threw it into another in her way. As she released her quirk, she was passed by a dead-eyed Iida, who was giving a piggyback ride to a smug-looking Shinso. Will he ever not fall for that? Ochako's sweat dropped. However, Iida soon skidded to a stop as they reached the next obstacle. The Shogun of Explosions, Dynamite has overtaken Todoroki as he literally flies over the second obstacle, the fall. Careful, lil competitors. One wrong move and you're out. We are legally required to inform you all that there are several safety precautions in place to avoid serious injury. While several of her classmates were fearfully staring down the deep, dark chasm, 𝗬 jumped, landing halfway across the cable, between the stone pillars and proceeding forward on all fours. This is my time to shine, 𝗬 said to herself. Easy peasy. She was then passed by a floating head of long green hair and two arms carrying a torso and legs, making the frog girl tilt her head and croak at the odd scene. 𝗧's gym uniform isn't DNA infused, 𝗵𝗲 called out as she passed the frog girl, running along another cord like it was the easiest thing in the world. She's so cool, 𝗬 couldn't help thinking. Meanwhile, May was having the time of her life as her grapple wire was quickly reeled in and her hover saws allowed her to smoothly glide up the stone pillar and launch herself onto the platform. Her babies were working beautifully and she was sure 𝗵𝘃𝗲 would make it to the next round. It would no doubt be a team event where he'd be able to help her further show off even more of her adorable babies. Greenie was cool and all, he and Freckle-sensei always giving her and her classmates notes on new baby ideas, but there was something about the living firecracker that she couldn't help being attracted to. It took a while for him to warm up to her, but now they got on like hydrogen and oxygen. They were alike in a lot of ways. Loud, blunt, knew they were both a cut above the rest, and, of course, they both enjoyed a good explosion. She wasn't sure whether it was love or not, but 𝗵𝘃𝗲 was definitely a potential candidate for when she was ready to make a different kind of baby. For some reason, Bakugo slightly shuddered. He blamed it on Zuko and his stupid ice. He was forced to touch down after literally blasting over the last obstacle and Zuko was trying his best to take advantage of this. However, they both stopped short at the edge of the last obstacle. Dynamite and Todoroki are neck and neck as they come to our final obstacle, the mine field. Don't worry, the mines aren't deadly, but they are loud and will send you flying, so watch your step. If you look closely, you can see where the mines are buried. Todoroki attempted to freeze a path for himself. Unfortunately, the mines still detonated in a pink cloud and Todoroki found himself hurled back to where he started. Bakugo laughed before attempting to fly over the field, but two turrets popped up from the ground and pelted him with paintball rounds. He was knocked back down and landed on two mines, sending him flying back and into a carefully stepping Todoroki, causing both boys to land on even more mines. The mines are also equipped with thermo triggers, meaning any change in temperature, hot or cold, will cause them to detonate. Also, we have measures in place to give those who can't fly a chance to catch up. Now you tell me, ya hobo-bastic, Bakugo angrily thought. Growling, Bakugo got back up and quickly scanned the field, plotting his course while Zuko was already back to where he was before being blown back. He watched as most of the other extras were following the 𝗵𝘃𝗲's lead, but several were more impatient and ended up triggering the mines. Engines had even attempted to outrun the explosions, but wasn't fast enough. However, some of his classmates were making decent progress. Fangs and Baggy Eyes were, as expected, maneuvering through the mines with cat-like precision. He also saw Kakashi using his many eyes to keep track of the mines' locations and, despite his size, was actually quite graceful. He even saw the goat-eyed extra from Gen Ed using his quirk to make platforms for himself to step on. Having thoroughly planned his route, Bakugo was about to proceed when someone ran and jumped past him. His eyes widened upon seeing Deku land on a mine and disappear into the pink smoke. Once it had cleared, he saw Deku landing again, but several meters forward and onto another mine and realized what the nerd was doing. Ah, fraggot! Bakugo yelled, blasting himself forward and doing his best to maneuver around where the mines had already detonated. Hearing the explosions getting closer, Todoroki turned his head and did a double take as he saw Midoriya using the mines as springboards, with Bakugo now mere meters away from him. He attempted to use his ice to stop them, but could only watch as they flew over him and the ice triggered another explosion. Dynamite and max damage have taken an explosive lead. Great job turning an obstacle into an advantage, boys. As they neared the end of the field, Bakugo tried to bump Deku off course while they were still in midair. However, Deku anticipated this and grinned as he grabbed Bakugo's arm and pulled him into a tight hug, throwing them both off balance. 𝗵𝘃𝗀 shouted a series of profanities as the pair spiraled and Izuku finally let go as they crashed at the edge of the field, triggering a final explosion. While 𝗵𝘃𝗀 was disoriented, Izuku sprinted forward. Max damage leaves Dynamite in the dust as he's the first to make it to the final stretch. Man, your kids are incredible, Eraser. So what else is new? Sho thought with a small smile. Dirty fraggin' rotten friggin' Sanuva dash, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 angrily ranted to himself as he used his quirk to blast forward once again. Meanwhile, Todoroki finally exited the minefield with a slight limp and an enraged expression on his face. He had had enough. He would not allow himself to be made a fool of again. He immediately went back to using his jagged ice to propel himself forward and had soon nearly caught up with 𝗵𝘃𝗀. That is, of course, until 𝗵𝘃𝗀 gave one final, desperate push in an attempt to catch up to Midoriya. Kill, wreck, frag, destroy dash, 𝗵𝘃𝗀 roared as he unleashed a massive, continuous explosion that quickly rocketed him next to Deku. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough. As they entered the hallway they started from, Deku, after turning his head slightly to deliver a cheeky smirk, gave a final sprint, leaving a roaring 𝗵𝘃𝗀 behind. Let's hear it for our first place winner, the incorruptible hero, Max damage. As the crowd roared and confetti rained down around him, Izuku raised a fist in triumph. He knew from watching every previous sports festival that there would be a double-edged reward for coming in first that'd carry over into the next event, but he just couldn't resist winning against Kaken. Speaking of, he turned to see Kaken take second place, soon followed by Todoroki. While Kaken was grumbling to himself, arms twitching from the strength of those final blasts, Todoroki was hunched over and panting with clouds of mist coming from his mouth as he limped toward the tunnel that led to Recovery Girl. Before entering, he shot Izuku a nasty glare that the other boy ignored. Mineta Minoru was so close. He made it past the mines and was using his sticky balls to bounce past the competition and to his goal. Yes, he was gonna make it. After this next bounce, he'd be within range to grab onto that hero course chick with the huge boobs and ride her sweet ass to the finish line. However, Yamamoto was well aware of the little creep and had a good idea what he was planning. As he took his final leap, a lecherous grin on his face and a ball in each hand, a staff with a metal fist on the tip ripped through the back of her gym uniform shirt and struck the little pervert right in the face, breaking his nose and sending him bouncing back. Shinso chuckled as the purple-headed pervert bounced past him and Sato, who had a blank look as he carried Shinso on his back. And that's 42, Midnight announced. For those who didn't make the cut, don't you worry. We have plenty of other opportunities for you to shine. For now, while we wait for everyone else to finish, please see Recovery Girl if you need to. Come on, Mineta. Izuku heard the Gen Ed kid tiredly sigh. Looking up at the Jumbotron, Izuku saw he was being joined in the next round by the rest of 1A, 1B, that brown-haired boy from Gen Ed, Tsuburaba, his perverted and bloody-faced friend, Mineta, stuck to his chest, and, finally, Minoma. For someone who kept going on and on about his superiority, he seemed to take last place on purpose. Again, Izuku got a bad feeling about the manic blonde. Woo! Way to go, Uraraka yelled as she glomped her boyfriend. The rest of their friends minus 𝗵𝘃𝗀, who reluctantly went to see Recovery Girl about his arms, also gathered to commend his victory. Congratulations are indeed in order, Midoriya, Ida said, still looking a little glum about not placing higher in a race. Yes, well done, Momo said while zipping up her new PE uniform top. And you didn't have to hitch a ride to get your spot, Sato said, him and Ida attempting to give Shinso scathing looks, though he looked nonplussed by their efforts. Thanks, guys, Izuku said, a little red. You all did great too. Hey, look. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 pointed to the TV above the gate he and Kamui Woods were guarding while Lady was posing for pictures. On the screen displaying him as the winner of the first event was a kid they both recognized. He seemed to have gone through a growth spurt since they last saw him, but that hair was unmistakable. It's that brat who made us look bad last year, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 said, tightening his fists. To be fair, we did that to ourselves, Kamui sighed, remembering the dressing down they and every other hero at the scene of the sludge villain incident received from the boy. We almost let a kid suffocate to death because our quirks weren't a perfect counter. Meanwhile, Another kid who may as well have been quirkless at the time figured out the villain's weakness and came up with dozens of different team-up options for us on the spot. Honesty, those extra lessons from Nizu were for the best. Yeah, I know, 𝗳𝗏𝗄𝐵 sighed, his anger turning into grumpy stubbornness as he looked away with his arms crossed. Doesn't mean I have to like it, though. Now that everyone's here, let's see what we have in store for you lot next. Midnight announced, cracking her whip as the Jumbotron once again quickly shuffled through several events until stopping on Cavalry Battle. Ah, a sports day classic, but with a twist. Midnight continued, licking her lips. You will divide yourselves into teams of 2 to 4 people. However, the twist comes in the form of the headbands the riders will be wearing. Each player has been assigned a point value based on their performance in the obstacle race, and each team will be given a headband with their combined total printed on it. The Jumbotron then showed the point values of each student. The point assignments go up by increments of 5, starting from the bottom. However, Midnight gave Izuku a predatory look. The reward for coming in first place is a point total of 10 million. And there it is, Izuku thought, looking down with a sigh as everyone turned to him with looks ranging from shock to pity to greedy hunger. Still he just smirked. Thank you for this gift, sensei, he said, bowing. As he straightened back up, almost everyone shuddered at the grin on his face that was disturbingly reminiscent of his uncle's. Alright, here are the rules, Midnight said. You have 15 minutes to swipe as many headbands as you can to raise your team's score, and they must all be worn from the neck up. If it's hidden elsewhere or even in the palm of your hand when time's up, it will not count. Another thing, even if you lose your headband or your team falls down, you can keep playing until time's up. Like with the last event, you can use your quirks as much as you like. However, no making a team fall on purpose or you'll be slapped with a red card, disqualifying you. A 15-minute timer then appeared on the Jumbotron. Now, you have 15 minutes to find your teams. Get going. Well, I'm afraid this is where I must take my leave, Iida bowed, before giving Izuku a challenging look while adjusting his glasses. I look forward to testing myself against you, my friend. Good luck, Iida, Izuku nodded with a smirk. Come on, 𝗬𝗏𝗄𝐵 said, popping up and grabbing Tsu by the arm. You gotta join my team. You'd be the perfect front horse. Rip, guess I'll see you guys on the field, Tsu called back to Izuku and Ochako as she was pulled away. As the rest of the students started to break apart and talk amongst themselves, Izuku turned to his girlfriend. So, you want to team up with the guy everyone's gonna be gunning for? He asked, rubbing the back of his head. Of course, Aakan said with a wide smile. What kind of girlfriend would I be to abandon my man in his time of need? She giggled at how red Izuku got. Meanwhile, Mineta was about to attempt to get the attention of that busty hero student by accidentally groping her. He was so smart. However, he was stopped by the same overwhelming pressure he felt when he tried flirting with the round-faced babe. Turning around, he saw a tall guy with wild purple hair and dark eyes scowling down at him. Don't make me bust you up, little man, he deadpanned, cracking his knuckles. Once the little pest was gone, Hitoshi cleared his throat to get Yamamo's attention. Wanna team up? He asked, quickly continuing before she could respond. Before you say anything, I just want you to know I won't use my quirk to force you to be on my team, so if you don't dash. Sure, Yamamo said, cutting Shinso off. I would love to join your team, Hitchan, she smiled. Did you have anyone else in mind? Quickly getting over his shock, Shinso smirked. How do you feel about starting out with 10 million points? Todoroki's eyes narrowed as he saw Yaoyorozu walk off with Shinso towards Midoriya. He was hoping to get her and Kaminari on his team, but Shinso must have used his quirk on her, which meant Kaminari was out. Still, he had Iida, which covered his mobility, but he needed 2 more for the right and left flanks. Todoroki, Iida called with 2 students in tow. I believe I have found our final 2 teammates. With him was Tokoyami and one of his 1C classmates, Tsuburaba. I'm familiar with Tokoyami's quirk and what it can offer, but what's yours again? He asked Tsuburaba. It's called solid air, he explained before demonstrating by taking a breath, blowing and making a small, round transparent wall in midair. I use my breath to solidify air into constructs like walls and platforms. They stay where I make them, and while they can be broken, it's not easy. After examining the small shield, Todoroki nodded in approval. All right, girls, Hime cheerfully said, practically dragging Tsu over to Itsuka and Setsuna. I got our fourth. Perfect, Itsuka said. Ajui's enhanced eyesight and tongue will make her the perfect horse while me and Himiko cover the flanks. Meanwhile, I'll be snatching up headbands and keeping them out of reach. Setsuna grinned as her head and hands popped off and began floating around the group. Sounds good to me, Ribbit, Tsu nodded. Also, just call me Tsu. Nito's eye twitched as he saw Fukukato, Kendo, and Tokage talking with that frog girl from 1A. He couldn't believe the bloodsucker had convinced so many of his classmates that it was a good idea to fraternize with the enemy. He may not currently be a member of 1B, but he still cared for them and was looking forward to rejoining them. He tried to get them to listen to his plan to hold back and observe their enemies in the first round so they could team up in the second and completely crush them. Unfortunately, it seems Fukukato has poisoned their minds against him. At least Kamakiri, Kurwaro, and Yanagi were still willing to give him a chance. He'd prove himself by getting them to the third round, and then he'd be back in 1B. He then patted the little insurance he had in his pocket. After all, even main characters needed a little extra boost every now and then, right? Katsuki just shook his head at the display in front of him as the Dude brothers were participating in that manly handshake they saw in that old Predator movie they watched the other night. He, Sharky, and Lashes were the perfect team. He could blast off without worrying about damaging either of them, grab the points, and fly back. Flawless strategy. They didn't even need a 4. Blasty. Wow. Something then crashed into him and he was suddenly on the ground with something soft smothering him. Team up with me. He recognized Mei's voice and now realized what was smothering him. To get the frag off of me, Inkling. Bakugo shouted, pushing her off and trying to hide his blush from getting a faceful of her ample chest. Come on, Blasty, let's team up. Mei excitedly said as she threw open a large chest of inventions she pulled from who knows where. You know firsthand how good my babies are, and I brought a few that'll complement your quirk quite nicely. Hey, is that a jetpack? Lashes asked. Sure is. Mei said, showing off said baby. I based it off the one used by Air Jet. I figure it could help Blasty better maneuver around the field without overworking his quirk. Sounds pretty handy to me, Kirishima said, turning to their rider. What do you think, Baku bro? Bakugo grinned savagely. I think we're gonna use Inkling's babies to frag the competition to hell. Hell yeah. Lashes cheered. So, we're going for the 10 million, right? Before Kirishima could agree, Bakugo just scoffed. Wrong, Chrome Dome, Bakugo said, looking over to where Deku was talking with his team, recognizing the shy-teating grins he and baggy eyes were sharing. If I know Deku, and I definitely do, targeting him will just be a waste of time. Besides, it doesn't matter what place we get in this stupid game. It's only the first and last events people really care about. All that matters is stealing enough points to make it to the third round. Once they had their headband and asked Midnight a few questions regarding the use of Momo's quirk, Team Alchemist got into formation. On the left and right flanks were Hitoshi and Ochako, with Izuku taking the spot of the front horse and Yamamo as the rider. Yamamo then used her quirk to create a saddle and harness that kept them all connected and Izuku carrying their weight. He had been awake for long enough to lift a semi-truck, so 3 people was nothing. We all good on the plan? Izuku asked, looking back at his teammates. Yep, Ochako beamed with a thumbs up. You have our full confidence, Midoriya, Yamamo nodded, her top tied to make it a belly shirt. We're with you, boss man, Hitoshi grinned. After nodding back with a smile, Izuku scanned the rest of the field, taking note of the various teams and forming strategies while waiting for the timer to end. And that's time, Midnight announced. Alrighty, then. The teams are set and our umpire is ready. How about one final countdown? 3, 2, 1. At the sound of the horn, almost every team charged towards Team Alchemist. With the other teams focused on them, they didn't notice Tokage's hands making off with 2 headbands. Izuku then gave the signal to Uraraka to remove their gravity before he leapt into the air. Team Alchemist has taken to the air. Seems they're planning on keeping that 10 million points out of reach. Damn it, Todoroki growled before sighing. Well, they'll have to come down eventually. Until then, let's get some more points. Tokoyami? Right? The bird-headed boy nodded as dark shadows slunk to the ground, flattening to sneak up on their targets. How you doing, Aachen? Izuku asked. Once they were high enough, he told Ochako to turn off her quirk to stop them from going any higher before activating it again for them to hover. I'm good, she nodded. All that extra training really paid off. We should be able to stay up here for about 5 minutes, give or take. Perfect, Izuku nodded. 𝗵𝗲𝗄, get started with phase 2. 𝗵𝗲𝗄 nodded before taking out a protein bar from her pocket. She knew it was a good idea to ask Aizawa about whether she could bring food or not. Well, while we wait for Newton's third law to take effect on Team Alchemist, let's see how everyone else is doing. Seems Team Split has taken an early lead, followed by Teams Todoroki and Dynamite. Using an explosion to knock back Earlobe's attack and disorient her, Bakugo managed to grab the floating headband of the invisible rider before using the jetpack to zoom back to his team. On the way, he felt a tug on his back and was brought to an abrupt halt. The jetpack was enveloped in a pink glow and was being held in place. What-dash? Suddenly, he felt the headbands he had collected being pulled from his neck and quickly grabbed them. Unfortunately, he wasn't fast enough as his original headband went flying into the hand of that smug prick from 1B. Well, formerly from 1B. Team Monoma has managed to snatch Team Dynamite's headband, putting them in 3rd place. What's wrong, Dynamite? That little toy you got from that psycho from the support course can't measure up to one of 1B's superior quirks? Monoma smugly asked. Bakugo growled as he undid the jetpack's harness and blasted himself back to his approaching team. Follow that blonde bastard, he commanded. I'm getting our points back with interest. Hell yeah, both Kirishima and Tetsutetsu cheered while Hatsum just grinned her wicked grin. Tsuburaba had made a shield to block the thorny vines when he felt something fall onto his head. His eyes widened when he saw what it was. Todoroki, look, he shouted, passing it up to his rider. The heterochromatic teen's eyes widened as well upon seeing the 10 million point headband. How fortunate! 𝗵𝗲𝗄 must have dropped it, Ida said before another headband worth 10 million points fell in front of them. And then another. And then another. Soon, the field was covered in headbands of various amounts with teams trying to grab as many as they could. Hallelujah! We're at the halfway point and it's raining headbands. Unfortunately for the students, they're worthless. We have a way of confirming the real headbands from the fakes. Todoroki scowled as he threw the headband away and glared up at the sky. What was Midoriya doing? Hitoshi couldn't keep the smile off his face as headbands were flying out of 𝗵𝗲𝗄's hands. He knew teaming up with Midoriya was the right call. He might not even need to use his quirk this round. Alright, I think that should be enough, Izuku said, checking his watch. 𝗵𝗲𝗄, you ready to drop? With her face and neck covered in headbands and a hand on the harness of the parachute she created, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 gave a thumbs up. Alright, Aachen. Release. With that, Ochako tapped her fingers together. Looks like what went up is finally coming down as Team Alchemist. Descends from the heavens and, she does know all those headbands are worthless, right? I would imagine so. They're likely to protect their real headband. With so many fakes, trying to find the real one would be a fool's errand. As Team Alchemist landed, the ground began to freeze. Will he ever learn, Izuku thought, shaking his head. To avoid slipping and falling, Izuku delivered a powerful axe kick to break up the ice. Once they landed, they heard Ida's voice and a blur shot past then with a large, dark hand ripping away most of 𝗵𝗲𝗄's headbands. Oh, I see, Izuku calmly said as Hitoshi and Ochako helped 𝗵𝗲𝗄 rebalance herself. The ice wasn't to trap us, it was to increase Ida's speed. Clever. With 7 minutes on the clock, Team Todoroki has managed to snatch most of Team Alchemist's headbands. But did they get the right one or will they need to risk another pass? Eraser, that tracker say who has the 10 million? Why don't you take a look for yourself? What the dash? Todoroki didn't have time to go through all of the headbands, so he just wrapped them all around his neck and face. Looking up at the board, he scowled as his points didn't go up. However, he paled when he noticed Midoriya's team wasn't in first place. In fact, they didn't have any points at all. How was that possible? When did they? Suddenly, everything clicked as Todoroki's eyes scanned the field covered in headbands. "Come on, Inkling!" Katsuki shouted as he adjusted the gloves May had finished modifying for his quirk to work. "How long does it take to hook up a harness?" "A lot longer when you're constantly moving, Blasty," May shouted back. "The baby number 24 is ready." Grinning, Katsuki blasted forward. As several blades shot out from Monoma's back, Katsuki let out an explosion that shattered them. As Monoma shouted in pain, Katsuki managed to touch his and Monoma's headbands with May's super sticky finger gloves. They were designed to cling to buildings and carry over 900 kg, so just 2 fingers was enough to have a tight hold on the headbands. "Now!" Katsuki yelled and May reeled him back with both headbands coming off. "No!" Monoma yelled. "Damn it!" Kamakiri yelled, slashing at and missing Bakugo. Monoma began pulling his hair. This couldn't be happening. He needed to make it to the next round. He needed to show he wasn't worthless. He had no choice. Sticking his hand in his pocket, he popped the cap off the syringe and flinched as he felt the needle pierce his leg. Then, his eyes widened and his breathing quickened. He then shouted, grabbing his head before laughing maniacally. "Just, yeehaw! Surf's up, space ponies. I'm cooking gravy without the lumps." "Monoma?" Yanagi cautiously asked. He was acting spooky even for him. "Oh, shit," Kamakiri whispered to Kurwaro as they both saw the needle that fell from his pocket. They weren't the only ones. Monoma didn't notice the timer stop as he felt every quirk he ever copied returning to him, but stronger. He felt invincible. He dashed. Suddenly, a hand was over his mouth and, after inhaling something that smelled like lavender and chamomile tea, Monoma passed out. "Apologies for the interruption," Midnight announced as the Medabots arrived. It appeared as though Monoma Nido was going through some kind of quirk complication, so I decided to disqualify him for his and everyone else's safety. As she placed the boy on the stretcher, she subtly and carefully palmed the needle and closed the boy's mouth to hide his darkened tongue from the cameras. She then turned to the other 3 students. "If you would like, you 3 may continue with one of you acting as the writer." After a brief discussion, Yanagi shook her head, speaking for the group. "Apologies, Midnight-sensei, but with such little time left as well as the circumstances regarding our writer's disqualification, we'd prefer to sit out the rest of the round." "That is understandable," Midnight nodded, letting the 3 follow the bots carrying Monoma off the field. "Thank you, Midnight. A shame about Team Monoma, but I think I speak for everyone when I say I hope the boy will be okay. However, for everyone else, 5-minute warning." Izuku couldn't help smiling. His plan was working perfectly. All he had to do now was avoid any attention until the last minute. "Midoriya!" Todoroki called out as he tried to freeze the ground underneath them. "Where's the headband?" "Ah shucks. How did you figure us out?" Shinso asked. Todoroki's eyes narrowed. He remembered Shinso's quirk and the requirements from the first day. He wasn't gonna fall for. "It was pretty easy, actually," Tsuburaba smugly said. "We dashed." Suddenly, Tsuburaba brought his team to a halt while Shinso just waved goodbye as they disappeared into a smoke bomb Yamamo created. "Damn it, we forgot to warn him against Shinso's quirk," Tokoyami said as Dark Shadow shook him out of the mental quirk. "Your cousin's a riot, Hime?" Tokage laughed as her head briefly reattached to her body. She kept their headbands safe, but had to keep briefly reattaching her pieces to her body every few minutes. When this happened, the other girls were in charge of keeping her safe. "Yeah, I guess it was a good idea to take your advice about not bothering with him," Kendo said as she swatted away Shiozaki's vine trying to creep up on them. "Told ya," Hime grinned as Tsu leapt them all over a bunch of those purple balls stuck to the ground. Izuku was taught personally by the Weasel King of Trolling. Only 1 minute left and nobody has the 10 million points. Because of this, Team Dynamite's in first, followed by Team Todoroki in second, Team Split in third and wait. Team Alchemist takes back the lead with 10 million points. But how? Given how Alchemist's quirk works, My guess would be she attached a tracking device to the real headband and mixed it in with the fakes she littered the ground with to lead everyone else on a wild goose chase until the last minute. Not a bad strategy. On our right, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 said as another wave of ice came at them. Izuku leapt out of the way. Todoroki just didn't know when to give up. Hey, 𝗵𝗲𝗄, Izuku said with a wry smile. Since he wants our attention so badly, how about we give it to him? With a smile she may or may not have picked up from training with Walter, 𝗵𝗲𝗄 nodded in confirmation and began using her quirk. Todoroki's eyes widened as Midoriya made a U-turn and was now charging at them. He noticed too late the protective goggles the other team were all wearing as 𝗵𝗲𝗄 threw a flashbang that not only incapacitated Dark Shadow, but also disoriented the rest of the team. Iida took the brunt of the attack, but he and Tsuburaba had managed to partially block their eyes with their arms and tried forming barriers that Midoriya shattered. As he was still getting his bearings, he felt a tug on his neck and his instincts took over as his left side ignited. Through his still blurry vision, he could make out 𝗵𝗲𝗄 recoiling with a single headband in her hand. Then, as he realized what he just did, a loud buzzer went off. That's time, everybody! In first place, we have Team Alchemist. In second place, Team Dynamite. In third, thanks in part to some last-minute thievery from Team Alchemist, give it up for Team Split. Finally, in fourth, we've got Team Todoroki. These 4 teams will have the privilege of moving on to the final event. But first, an hour-long break. Wanna join me for lunch, Eraser? No thanks. Just wake me when the break's over. As 𝗵𝗲𝗄 and Uraraka helped lead Iida to Recovery Girl to get checked out, Todoroki glared at his left side. I did it again, Todoroki thought, tightening his fist. For the second time since I got here, I broke my vow. But why is it suddenly so difficult to dash? He was brought out of his thoughts by a hand on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Midoriya with a serious look on his face. We need to talk, he said, his tone and grip leaving no room for argument. Izuku and Shoto were facing each other on opposite walls of the hallway, the former with his arms crossed and a serious expression on his face. All right, Todoroki, Izuku said. We need to talk about this obsession you have with me. I am not obsessed with you, Shoto denied, only to be cut off by a derisive snort. Oh please, Izuku scoffed, angrily pointing at the other boy. You've had it out for me since day one. You recognized my name as the top scorer of the entrance exam and have been obsessed with proving you're better than me ever since, with each attempt failing miserably. Shoto was now glaring at him, but Izuku didn't care and proceeded to list off the other boys' failures. First, you completely disregarded Kaken's help because you wanted to take me out on your own during the battle trials. Then, at the USJ, you got in the way of a pro hero and would have trapped us there had I not sent Iida ahead to get help. Finally, just now, you risked your team's spot in the third event by going after my team till the last second despite having enough points to advance. Izuku then took a deep breath and calmed himself down before speaking again. Look, I get that you must be under a lot of pressure from your old man, but that doesn't dash. I don't give a damn about pleasing that bastard, Shoto coldly said as his fists tightened. All that matters is my vow, the vow that you've made me break twice now. And what vow is that? Izuku asked, cocking his eyebrow. Shoto's glare traveled to the floor. He didn't owe Midoriya anything, but it was clear he wasn't gonna let him leave without some sort of explanation. Seeing no other choice, Todoroki heavily exhaled before looking up. Are you familiar with quirk marriages? Vlad was sitting next to the infirmary bed where the unconscious boy was lying. He was disappointed in both himself and his former student. He knew it was, as Aizawa would put it, illogical, but he couldn't help blaming himself. It was his decision to have the boy transferred. He was hoping it would teach Monoma a lesson in humility, but all it did was make him more desperate. He knew he was a bit unstable, but he never suspected that he would resort to using trigger. He thought the kid was smarter than that, but desperation made even the smartest people do stupid things. Vlad had been planning on re-enrolling Monoma after the festival no matter where he placed, but now that was an impossibility. He had already burned bridges with most of his class and now he's used up Nizu's goodwill. Whatever hopes 𝗵𝗲𝗄 had of re-entering UA's hero course were dashed the moment that needle pierced his skin. Vlad was brought out of his sulking by recovery girl entering with Nizu and Midnight, 𝗵𝗲𝗄's current homeroom teacher, in tow. Well, the good news is the drug has already worn off, recovery girl said. Thankfully, this seems to be the first time he's used trigger and it was a weaker strain. When he wakes up, he'll have a headache and his sense of taste won't work right for about a week, but he should be fine otherwise. Small favors, Vlad sighed. So, what's next for the kid? Midnight asked, looking down at her student with pity. His parents are on the way to discuss that very topic, Nizu said, visibly frowning. Unfortunately, it will not be at UA. Young 𝗵𝗲𝗄's antagonistic and toxic attitude has cost him many friends and our style of doing things clearly isn't helping him. Shiketsu has a rehab program that'll be more fitting and the principal owes me a favor, so this little incident shouldn't ruin his chances of a successful career. Vlad nodded and decided to stay with 𝗵𝗲𝗄 as everyone else left to wait for the parents. Endeavor stormed through the private corridors of the arena like he owned them. He needed to find Shoto and talk some sense into him. He had been furious and nearly pulled the boy from UA when he was told his masterpiece was transferred to Gen Ed, but had agreed once the details behind the decision were explained to him. Honestly, what was that boy thinking? Even he knew not to get in the way of his teachers when he was a student. Besides, hearing he could earn his way back in through the sports festival would be the perfect motivator to embrace his flames. He'd learned that accepting his destiny was the only way of winning and becoming a hero. Unfortunately, it seems he still hasn't learned his lesson. His performance thus far has been dreadful and this ridiculous rebellion was gonna cost him his chance if he didn't. It's been a while, NG, a deep voice from behind him said, making him stop in his tracks. Endeavor's flames flared as he turned to glare at the one person he hated just as much as All Might, if not more so. Junior, he growled. What are you doing back here? Piccolo sneered at the number 2 hero with his arms crossed. None of your business, demon spawn, Endeavor snarled back. Actually it is, Piccolo said, stepping forward. This area is off limits except for teachers and students. Seeing as I'm a teacher, I can report you and have you removed from the arena. Piccolo stopped in front of the flaming hero, using his height to literally look down on him. I'll ask you again, what are you doing back here? Got lost on the way to the bathroom, Endeavor said through clenched teeth. Thought so, Piccolo smirked. Allow me to help you find it? That won't be necessary, Endeavor tried to say, but was cut off by a hand on his shoulder. No, really, Piccolo said, his grip tightening even as Endeavor increased his heat. I insist. Endeavor ripped his shoulder away and, after a tense stare down, reluctantly allowed Piccolo to lead the way. He'd simply have to find another way to speak to his masterpiece. There was a tense silence between the two until they arrived at the exit, where Piccolo broke it. You really fucked that boy up, you know that, he said, making the flaming hero sputter. How dare you dash? You still don't get it, do you? Piccolo said, stopping at the exit and turning to glare at Endeavor. All Might's strength is only one of the reasons why he's number 1. Your son is strong, but he's also arrogant, reckless, and antisocial. You really think the public will accept someone like that as the number 1 hero? The two glared at each other until Endeavor angrily stomped through the exit and made his way back to where his spot was. What the hell did that green bastard know? Shoto was his masterpiece. He was perfect and his reckless behavior was just a part of his rebellious phase. Once he accepted his destiny, everything else would fall into place. It had to. Thank you, Yagi nodded as he paid for his drink. Emmy wanted to bug check on Sho and Yagi volunteered to look after young Eri and walk with her by the stalls, much to several other members of staff's disappointment. The only rule Emmy gave him was that he wasn't allowed to buy her mochi since they were trying to cut down on how many sweets she was allowed before dinner. However, she said nothing about candied apples, which he was shocked to find out Eri had never heard of. Kami he wished. Garrote left Chisake alive so All Might could Detroit smash what was left of him into paste. Young Eri had warmed up to him quite fast after learning he'd worked with one of her 2 heroes' all-time favorite hero. She had so many questions about All Might and Yagi was more than happy to answer them. Mr. Yagi, "Why is All Might's costume so colorful?" Eri asked in between bites of her sweet treat as they took a break to sit on a bench. "It's because he's a big fan of America," 𝐎𝐽𝐫 explained. "He spent a lot of time there when he was younger and likes to pay tribute to it by dressing in the colors of their flag. It'd be like if you decided to wear green to show how much you like young Midoriya." Nodding in understanding, she continued eating with a small, content smile as she happily kicked her feet. He remembered Aizawa telling him and the rest of the staff about how she couldn't remember how to smile and was so proud of how much progress she's made in such a short amount of time. "I'm finished, Mr. 𝐎𝐽𝐫," Eri said, holding up the remains of her apple as she wiped the red from her face. As 𝐎𝐽𝐫 threw away the core and stick into the can next to him, he recognized two female heroes in civilian attire getting food from a stall called Bean Daddy's Burritos, where a short, fat man was working the grill while an even shorter man with a white cat mutation was at the register. One was the rabbit hero, 𝗵𝗃𝗄, who he hadn't had the pleasure of meeting yet. The other, however, was someone he was very familiar with. "Ryū-Tatsuma," he called out, waving. Turning around, Ryukyu found 𝐎𝐽𝐫 sitting with Eri, who nervously scooched closer to him and smiled back. "Oh, hello 𝐎𝐽𝐫," she happily said, walking over to greet him. She and All Might had talked a few times since meeting at the recommendation exam, and she had met the hero's secretary when she visited the agency. She quickly figured out they were one and the same, but hadn't let him know that. It should be his decision to share such a secret with her. "It's been a while," she said. "Well, I've been a little busy," he said, standing and scratching the back of his head as Eri scooched behind him. "You know, me and All Might have been acting as Big Green's TAs, helping shape the next generation of heroes. It can be difficult but quite rewarding." "I know the feeling," she nodded with an understanding smile, thinking about Nijire. Before they could continue their conversation, 𝗵𝗃𝗄 came up to them. "Yo, Ryu," 𝗵𝗃𝗄 said with a full mouth of burrito as she handed another to Ryukyu while looking 𝐎𝐽𝐫 up and down and noticing the little girl peeking out from behind him. "Here's your food." "Who's Mr. Sticks and the unicorn?" "This is 𝐎𝐽𝐫 Toshinori," Ryukyu said. "You know, All Might's assistant." "𝐎𝐽𝐫, this is my friend, Usajiyama Rumi, the rabbit hero, 𝗵𝗃𝗄." "Sup?" 𝗵𝗃𝗄 nodded. "It's nice to meet you, 𝗵𝗃𝗄," he said with a bow before stepping to the side to reveal Eri, who flinched slightly and was nervously looking down at her red boots. "And this is young Eri, a ward of UA." "It's nice to meet you, Eri," Ryukyu softly replied while crouching down to talk to her. "Have you been enjoying the festival?" After a moment, Eri quickly looked between the two heroes before quickly nodding. "She's a little shy, but she's got a smile that can rival All Might's," 𝐎𝐽𝐫 chuckled as he ruffled the ever-reddening Eri's hair. "I bet," 𝗵𝗃𝗄 said in a much more subdued tone than she normally had. "Anyone you're rooting for today, Squirt?" "There's Deku and Aachen," Eri nervously said after a moment, her small smile reappearing. "They both saved me from some bad people and I want them to win." "She means young Max Damage and 𝗬𝗏𝗍," 𝐎𝐽𝐫 explained, and both heroes nodded. "And then there's Hime Nason," Eri excitedly continued as her smile grew. "She's my big sister and her quirk is really cool. Her hero named 𝗬𝗏𝗏 and Emmy said she was rescued by Deku and his friends, too." "This Deku kid sounds like someone to keep an eye on, huh?" 𝗵𝗃𝗄 asked, a wry smirk on her face as Eri excitedly nodded. While the rabbit hero continued talking with the aggressively cute girl, Ryukyu sat down next to 𝐎𝐽𝐫 and the two began catching up. She had to admit, the more she got to know him, the more she started to like 𝐎𝐽𝐫 Toshinori more than All Might. "That's why I have to beat you," Shoto finished his story, glaring at a surprisingly blank-faced Midoriya. "To honor my mother by using only her ice and showing that bastard that I don't need his fire to be the best." After a moment of silence, Izuku closed his eyes and took several deep, calming breaths. "Todoroki," he calmly said, "both you and your father are fucking idiots." Shoto seemed to choke on air as Midoriya took out his phone and began looking for something. He was about to say something but was silenced by Izuku's glare. "First, I hate to break it to you, but I refuse to be your All Might. I have no plans to become the #1 hero, nor any kind of symbol, so quit trying to force this one-sided rivalry on me. You know, for someone who claims to hate Endeavor, you certainly act like him." I'm nothing like 𝗧𝗏. Todoroki was silenced by Izuku shoving his phone in his face, shocked at the picture he saw. It was from an article about the festival, and the photo was him scowling at the end of the minefield. He was the spitting image of endeavor. You're both arrogant, entitled brats who seem to think power is all that matters, Izuku said as he pocketed his phone. It's clear he only ever focused on physical training rather than what really matters to be a hero. What are you talking about? Shoto asked, honestly confused. Do you honestly think All Might is the #1 hero because of his strength alone? Izuku scoffed. Yeah, a hero's quirk plays a part in their ranking, but in the end, it's a popularity contest. All Might is the #1 hero because he's kind, makes time for his fans, and always has a reassuring smile on his face to help put everyone at ease. Meanwhile, Endeavor's a bitter asshole who cares more about fame than just helping people. Hell, his high success rate and cool quirk are the only reasons he's ranked so high, and I wouldn't be surprised if Hawks took his spot in the next rankings with how well-liked he is. Izuku took another breath before continuing. What Endeavor did was sick, and neither you nor your family deserve to go through that. However, that doesn't excuse how many lives you're willing to risk just to stick it to your old man. I'm not 𝗧𝗏. I'm not blind or stupid, Todoroki. I noticed how you slowed down during the obstacle race and even our fight during the battle trials, where you had access to a temperature regulator. You're allowing your hatred to literally handicap yourself, and it's gonna get someone or even yourself killed. Izuku's eyes narrowed at what he was about to say next. It was a low blow, but he needed to make Todoroki understand his way of doing things was wrong. After all, if he was right and Uncle Sho decided not to let Todoroki back into the hero course without accepting his fire, Todoroki might decide going vigilante would be a good way to prove everyone wrong about him. Does your mom know about how you're choosing to honor her? That made Todoroki flinch. How do you think she'll feel when she turns on the news and sees her hero son let a villain who can control ice use the half of his quirk she contributed to against him and several civilians? Will she feel honored knowing you let innocent people and yourself freeze to death? Todoroki was glaring down at the floor, searching desperately for a retort, but Izuku was done. Think about what I said, Izuku said as he walked down the hallway to leave the other boy to stew in his thoughts. You're not irredeemable, Todoroki. You can still be a great hero if you learn from your father's mistakes and get some help. As Izuku turned the corner, he saw Kaken standing there. The two shared a look before making their way to the cafeteria for lunch. Welcome back, folks. Before we get to the third event, we've got some recreational games for those who didn't make it to the finals. The 16 finalists, however, will have the option of participating or taking the time to prepare for their matches. Now, let's see what matchups we can look forward to. The Jumbotron then displayed the upcoming tournament brackets. Hefty Hero, Real Steel vs Mauve. Incorruptible Hero, Max Damage vs 𝗬𝗵𝗲. Creation Hero, Alchemist vs Jet Black Hero, 𝗬𝗏𝗏𝗏. Striking Hero, Battle Fist vs Rainy Season Hero, 𝗵𝘃𝗲. Todoroki Shoto vs Lizard Hero, Split. Shogun of Explosions, Dynamite vs Zero-G Hero, 𝐸𝗏𝗏𝗏. 𝗧𝗵𝗵𝗲 vs Recipro Hero, Silver Streak. Be Positive Hero, 𝗬𝗏𝗏 vs Sturdy Hero, Red Riot.